Welcome back to Background Historian. Tonight, we drift far beyond the boundaries of written history into the deep twilight of the ancient world, where stories were not merely entertainment but the very threads people used to understand existence itself. Long before cities rose, before alphabets formed, and before the first chronicles were carved into clay or stone, human beings told stories around fires, beneath starlit skies, passing their oldest truths and questions from voice to voice. These myths were not just tales of gods and monsters. They were explanations for the universe, reflections of early human fears and hopes, and spiritual maps that guided the first societies through life, death, creation, and the unseen forces they believed shaped all things. In this peaceful journey, we will gently walk through the world's earliest surviving mythologies, exploring how different cultures imagined the birth of the cosmos, the origins of humanity, the rise of gods and spirits, and the meaning of fate, morality, and the afterlife. Each part will unravel one thread of the global tapestry of myth, weaving together stories from Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, ancient China, the first peoples of the Americas, Aboriginal Australia, and more. Through soft, atmospheric storytelling, these episodes will illuminate how humans in every corner of the ancient world tried to understand who they were, where they came from, and what forces ruled their destinies. Part 1. Before writing, before memory, the birth of myth in humanity's earliest consciousness. To understand the oldest myths of the human race, we must first go back so far in time that the world feels unrecognizable. The land is colder, the skies darker, and human beings are scattered in small groups across continents they do not yet have names for. This is the Upper Paleolithic world, perhaps 40,000 years ago or even more, a time before writing, before cities, before agriculture. And yet, this was not a silent time. If anything, it was here, in these remote ages, that myth was born. The first myths emerged not as entertainment but as a quiet and necessary response to the overwhelming mystery of existence itself. Early humans lived intimately close to nature's danger and beauty. They saw storms split the sky open, watched lightning ignite forests, felt the earth shake beneath their feet, and saw stars wheel above them in unchanging patterns. They felt the presence of forces larger than themselves long before they gave those forces names. Myth grew from this sense of awe. It was the earliest form of meaning-making, a kind of spiritual vocabulary spoken before language fully matured. For much of human prehistory, we have no written words to guide us. Yet we are not without evidence. Across continents, early humans left behind paintings, carvings, burial sites, ritual objects, and symbolic markings that reveal glimpses of the stories they told. In the caves of Lascaux and Chauvet in France, in the rock shelters of Australia's Arnhem Land, in the ancient carvings at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and in the petroglyphs of southern Africa, there are shadows of beliefs that stretch beyond time. These locations serve almost like whispers, faint echoes of the earliest myths spoken tens of thousands of years ago. The first myths were closely tied to survival. Early humans needed explanations for the world around them. Why winter came, why animals behaved in certain ways, why death occurred, and what, if anything, lay beyond it. At night, around fires that pushed back the dark, stories were told about the moon that changed its face, the sun that traveled across the sky, the spirits believed to dwell in rivers, mountains, and forests. Myth became a kind of map, allowing early humans to navigate fears and uncertainties. Through story, the vast and unknowable world became just slightly more understandable, slightly less frightening. Many scholars believe that the earliest myths centered around animism, the belief that all things, animals, plants, rocks, storms, even the wind, possess some kind of spirit or agency. To the earliest humans, the world was alive with consciousness. A river did not simply flow, it chose to flow. A storm did not simply arrive, it expressed something. An animal was not simply hunted. It was respected, honored, and in many cases believed to possess supernatural qualities. This worldview made the natural world deeply personal, and myth reflected that intimacy. One of the most striking pieces of prehistoric evidence is the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a 40,000-year-old ivory statue depicting a human figure with the head of a lion. This is not simply an artistic flourish. It suggests that early humans had developed a sophisticated symbolic imagination. They blended human and animal forms to express beings that were more than natural. These hybrid figures likely represented spirits, deities, guardians, or mythic ancestors, entities that existed in both physical and spiritual worlds. From this small statue alone, we can infer a rich mythological landscape. It implies a belief in beings that existed beyond ordinary experience. It points to rituals, stories, and shared cultural imagination. Even though the details are lost to time, the symbolism remains powerful. It suggests that myth was not an accidental invention but a deeply intentional one. As humans migrated across the globe, from Africa into Eurasia, Australia, and eventually the Americas, myths traveled with them. Over time, these stories evolved and diverged, shaped by new environments and new challenges. But certain themes remained remarkably consistent, suggesting that some mythic ideas were already ancient by the time humans settled the world. One of these themes is the creation of the world, often referred to as a creation myth. Even the earliest humans must have wondered where everything came from. Did the world always exist? If not, who or what created it? Why does life begin, and why does it end? Across nearly every culture studied, stories emerged to answer these questions, long before writing allowed these myths to be recorded. In many prehistoric societies, the world was believed to have emerged from chaos, a formless expanse that preceded creation. Whether described as darkness, water, emptiness, or silence, this primordial state came before all else. From it rose the first beings, spirits, gods, or cosmic animals, who shaped the world. Later civilizations like the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Greeks would write down sophisticated versions of these cosmic beginnings, but their structures reflect much older, prehistoric roots. The idea that everything came from nothingness is far older than the earliest written myths. It is a universal intuition that may stretch back to the very dawn of storytelling. Another recurring theme is the origin of humans. Early people likely explained their own emergence in mythic terms, imagining humanity as crafted by gods, born from earth, descended from animals, or shaped from the elements. These stories were not literal explanations, they were reflections of identity. By telling where humans came from, communities defined their place in the world. Equally important was the mythic exploration of death, arguably the deepest and most universal human concern. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric societies practiced intentional burials, adorned bodies with red ochre, placed tools or ornaments beside the dead, and built tombs or ritual sites. These practices indicate a belief that something continued after death, that the dead needed preparation or protection, or that they could influence the living. The afterlife, regardless of its specific form, was one of the earliest mythological concepts. It helped people cope with the mystery and finality of human mortality. Yet even in their most spiritual or symbolic forms, myths were not completely separate from daily life. They informed hunting practices, dictated social norms, guided relationships with the natural world, and shaped early concepts of morality. Myths taught lessons: how to behave, how to survive, how to respect the unseen. In many ways, they were early humanity's first form of education. The atmosphere in which these stories were told also shaped their power. Imagine a quiet night in a Paleolithic camp. The fire crackles. Shadows dance on cave walls. People gather close, wrapped in furs against the cold, listening to a storyteller whose voice is the single thread weaving the group together. Children watch with wide eyes. Adults listen with reverence. The myths are not written, they live in memory, passed down through generations with slight variations each time. In this sense, myth was a living organism, evolving as societies evolved. Part 1 sets the foundation for our journey. Myth did not begin in temples or palaces. It began in the human mind, in the desire to understand the world and to give structure to the mysteries of existence. The earliest myths were not authored by individuals but shaped by entire communities. They were shared truths, not personal ones. As we move forward, the series will explore the earliest recorded mythologies. Sumerian, Egyptian, Chinese, Indigenous American, Australian Aboriginal, and many more, tracing how these ancient stories grew more structured, layered, and symbolic as civilizations developed. But the essence of myth, the quiet heartbeat of wonder and explanation, was already present tens of thousands of years before the first words were written. Part 2. The first civilizations and the crystallization of myth. Sumer, the cradle of written story. As humanity gradually shifted from scattered hunter-gatherer communities to permanent settlements, myth began to change as well. What had once been fluid, spoken, shared in intimate circles around fires was now slowly taking on more structure. With agriculture came stability, with stability came cities, and with cities came the first known efforts to preserve stories in durable form. Nowhere is this transformation more visible than in ancient Sumer, located in the fertile lands of southern Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It is here, in the world's oldest known urban society, that myths first became part of a written legacy. But before writing, before clay tablets, Sumer too had an era of pure oral tradition. Early settlers brought with them legends, cosmologies, and ancestral memories passed down from generations whose names have long been lost. What makes Sumer special is not that it invented myth, but that it captured myth in writing for the first time in human history. In doing so, it provided an extraordinary window into the early imagination of civilization. When we think of Sumerian mythology, one cannot avoid picturing the vast ziggurats rising out of the flat Mesopotamian plain or the networks of canals glistening in the sun. These landscapes shaped myth profoundly. For the Sumerians, the world was a delicate balance between human effort and divine forces. Water, essential for crops, both sustained and threatened life. Rivers flooded unpredictably. Storms swept across the plains with destructive force. In this environment, it was natural for early people to see the divine as intimately connected to rain, wind, water, and earth. The gods were not distant beings but active participants in the world's unfolding. One of the earliest and most important Sumerian myths is the story of creation, preserved in fragments across different tablets and later incorporated into Akkadian and Babylonian traditions. The Sumerians believed that the universe began with a primordial sea, a great cosmic ocean from which everything emerged. This ancient water goddess, Namu, is thought to have been the original source of all existence. From her came the first gods, who then shaped the heavens, the earth, and the realm between them. This sense of the cosmos rising out of watery chaos echoes prehistoric belief systems and appears across many early cultures, reflecting a deep intuitive connection humans shared with water as a symbol of both origin and mystery. In Sumer, the sky god, the earth goddess Ki, and the air god Enlil formed the first divine triad. Enlil, especially, played a central role in myth. He was the god of wind, storms, and breath, the intangible forces that moved through the world. To the Sumerians, breath was life, wind was presence, and storms were evidence of divine moods. Enlil's authority extended over kingship, justice, and the order of the world. In many ways, he represented the earliest conceptualization of a ruler deity, one whose power upheld the fabric of society. As cities grew and became centers of culture, myth became tied to specific locations. The city of Eridu, for example, was believed to be the first city ever created. In myth, it was the dwelling place of the god Enki, the deity of wisdom, waters, and creation. Enki was a gentle, clever god whose presence shaped some of the oldest stories to survive. He embodied the deep fresh water beneath the earth, an unseen yet essential force that made life possible. Many early myths describe Enki bringing arts, crafts, and civilization itself to humanity. Some stories portray him as a mediator, using wisdom to maintain peace among gods and mortals alike. It is in Sumer that we see one of the oldest versions of a flood myth, a narrative so powerful that it traveled across millennia into the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, the Hebrew Bible, and even Greek mythology. In the Sumerian tale, the gods decide to send a great flood to cleanse the earth, but the hero, often identified as Ziusudra, is warned by a divine messenger and builds a great boat to survive. This myth reveals a worldview shaped by real environmental experiences. Mesopotamia's rivers flooded unpredictably. Entire settlements could be washed away. The story's emotional core lies not simply in catastrophe but in renewal, the belief that humankind emerges wiser and more humble after facing nature's wrath. The Sumerians also developed early myths about human origins, which often portray humans as helpers to the gods. According to some texts, humans were created from clay mixed with divine essence. This theme of human shaped from earth appears across the ancient world, reflecting the widespread belief that humanity was intimately bound to the land. For the Sumerians, the purpose of human life was tied to service, tending the fields, maintaining temples, and performing rituals that sustained cosmic balance. Yet their myths were not purely utilitarian. They contain reflections on joy, suffering, mortality, and the fragile nature of existence. One of the most famous Sumerian stories, though preserved later in Akkadian form, is the Epic of Gilgamesh, arguably the world's first great literary masterpiece. While its final structure belongs to later Mesopotamian cultures, its origins lie in Sumerian legend cycles about a historical king of Uruk. The tale reflects themes deeply rooted in humanity's earliest mythic concerns: friendship, loss, heroism, mortality, and the search for eternal truth. Gilgamesh's journey to find immortality touches on the most ancient mythological question: what happens after death, and why must humans die? His failure highlights a truth that early societies seemed to accept with quiet resignation: immortality was reserved for gods. Humans must find meaning not in endless life but in the world they shape through their deeds. With the rise of writing, myths began to stabilize. Yet even as they were inscribed onto tablets, they remained alive within ritual, music, storytelling, and temple ceremonies. Priests recited cosmological hymns. Singers performed epic poetry accompanied by lyres. Myths were not simply read, they were enacted, felt, believed. The earliest written myths preserved something older than themselves, an echo of the human voice across thousands of years. What makes Sumer especially mesmerizing is how seamlessly its myths fused the spiritual with the practical. Their stories explained natural phenomena, justified social hierarchy, provided moral frameworks, and reinforced community identity. Myth served not only as entertainment but also as a guide for how to live. Through myth, the Sumerians understood their relationship with their gods, their environment, and each other. Yet it is essential to remember that Sumerian myths were not isolated creations. They stood at the crossroads of earlier prehistoric beliefs and the more complex mythologies that later civilizations would develop. The gods, stories, and motifs that originated in Sumer influenced Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Hittite, Canaanite, and Hebrew traditions. Ideas about creation, floods, divine kingship, cosmic order, and sacred law all radiated outward from Mesopotamia, carried by traders, scribes, conquerors, and migrants. In this sense, Sumer represents not only the dawn of writing but the dawn of preserved mythology. While myth had shaped humanity for countless millennia before Sumer's rise, it is here, on clay tablets baked in ancient kilns, that we first see myth crystallized, given form that could survive long after the people who told the stories were gone. This chapter closes with a sense of gratitude toward the ancient Sumerians. They were not the first storytellers, but they were the first to leave behind records that allow us to peer into the earliest structured mythic thought. Through their words, symbols, and stories, we can glimpse ideas that humanity had pondered long before the advent of writing. Their myths remind us that even as civilizations advanced, the core of myth remained the same, an attempt to understand life, death, the world, and our place within it. Part 3. Egypt's eternal stories, myths of cycles, kingship, and the divine order of the Nile. To travel from Sumer to ancient Egypt is to step into a different kind of mythic world. Where Sumer's gods were shaped by unpredictable rivers and fragile city-states, Egypt's myths grew from a landscape of rhythmic, dependable cycles. The Nile flooded each year with remarkable regularity, turning deserts into fertile gardens and giving rise to a worldview rooted not in chaos, but in stability, eternity, and cosmic harmony. This environmental constancy shaped Egypt's spiritual imagination as much as any temple or priest. In Egypt, myth became a way to explain not the unpredictability of existence, but its astonishing order. Imagine the Nile at dawn, with a soft golden light reflecting on still waters. Farmers stand by fields that have been renewed by the latest flood, spreading rich black silt across their land. Palm trees sway gently in the breeze. The desert beyond remains unchanged, vast and silent. In this timeless landscape, the Egyptians perceived the world as an eternal cycle, life, death, rebirth, always repeating, always moving like the sun across the sky. This sense of eternal return lies at the core of Egyptian mythology. Unlike Sumerian myths, which often emphasize conflict among gods, Egyptian myths focus on cosmic balance, known as Ma'at. Ma'at is not just a goddess but a principle, the idea of truth, justice, harmony, and right order. To the Egyptians, the universe was held together by Ma'at, and every being, mortal or divine, played a part in maintaining it. Kingship, rituals, storytelling, and social life all revolved around upholding this cosmic balance. At the center of Egyptian myth is the creation of the world, a story that exists in several versions across different temples, each reflecting the theological priorities of their region. In the Heliopolitan tradition, creation begins with none, the primordial waters, an endless, inert ocean out of which the first god, Atum, emerges. Atum creates Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture, who in turn give birth to Jeb, earth, and Nut, sky. The world unfolds like a family tree, gently branching outward. Even in creation, Egyptian myth emphasizes orderliness. Nothing erupts violently, it unfolds naturally, like the Nile swelling with the seasons. Other traditions, such as the Memphite theology, credit creation to Ptah, the god of craftsmen, who brings the world into existence not by physical birth but by the power of speech and thought. In this version, Ptah speaks the world into being, reflecting a sophisticated philosophical understanding of creation that echoes much later traditions in other cultures. The Egyptians, even in the earliest periods, imagined creation as purposeful and structured. Among all creation stories, one of the most influential is the myth of Osiris, Isis, Set, and Horus, a narrative that shaped Egyptian religion for thousands of years. Osiris, the gentle and wise king, ruled humanity with fairness and brought agriculture and civilization to the world. His brother Set, god of chaos and the desert's harshness, envied him deeply. Driven by ambition and resentment, Set tricked Osiris into entering a wooden chest, sealed it, and cast it into the Nile, where Osiris drowned and drifted away. Isis, Osiris's devoted wife, searched tirelessly for his body, guided by love and her magical powers. She retrieved him, hid him, and attempted to restore him to life, but Set found the body and tore it into 14 pieces, scattering them across the land. Undeterred, Isis gathered the fragments, reassembled her husband, and resurrected him long enough to conceive their son, Horus. Afterward, Osiris descended to the underworld, where he became the ruler of the dead. This myth served multiple purposes in Egyptian thought. It explained the origins of kingship, justified the pharaoh's authority, and offered a comforting vision of the afterlife. For the Egyptians, death was not an end but a continuation of existence in a different realm. Osiris's resurrection symbolized the renewal of the Nile, the rebirth of crops, and the eternal resilience of life. In this sense, the Osiris myth mirrors the agricultural cycle and expresses the deeply rooted Egyptian belief that life flows in cycles rather than linear paths. Horus, the son of Isis and Osiris, became the embodiment of rightful kingship. His conflicts with Set, depicted in myths as courtroom battles, physical fights, and cosmic struggles, represent the eternal contest between order and chaos. When Horus eventually triumphs, harmony is restored. Each pharaoh was regarded as a living Horus, the earthly embodiment of divine rulership, linking political authority to cosmic balance. Myth, therefore, was not merely religious narrative. It was a foundational ideology that shaped Egyptian governance. Another major figure in Egyptian mythology is Ra, the sun god, whose daily journey across the sky mirrors the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Each morning, Ra rises from the eastern horizon, traverses the sky, and descends into the western horizon, entering the underworld. There, he battles the serpent Apophis, a monstrous force of chaos who seeks to devour him and plunge the world into darkness. Every night, Ra's bark travels through 12 gates of the underworld, each representing an hour of the night, where he meets gods, spirits, and challenges that test his strength. By morning, he emerges victorious, reborn, and the world is filled with light again. This mythic cycle of Ra was not only symbolic but deeply experimental. Egyptians saw the sun rise every day, and in its dependable rhythm, they perceived cosmic reassurance. Even the struggle against Apophis was not terrifying but familiar, a reminder that chaos always threatens, yet order always prevails. Myth offered comfort by framing the universe as stable and cyclical. But Egyptian myth was not confined to grand cosmic narratives. It was woven into everyday life, in amulets worn for protection, in spells recited to ward off illness, in the elaborate funerary practices that sought to ensure safe passage into the afterlife. The Book of the Dead, though compiled later, contained spells and guidance based on older traditions. These texts reflect a worldview in which humans must navigate the divine world with care, respect, and knowledge. After death, the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was light, free of wrongdoing, the soul continued its journey. If heavy, it faced annihilation. This belief reinforced ethical conduct and connected morality to cosmic order. It is easy to imagine ancient Egyptians gathering in temple courtyards or along riverbanks during festivals celebrating the gods. Priests carried sacred statues concealed within shrines. Musicians played harps and sistrums. Incense drifted through the air. Mythology was not abstract. It lived in movement, sound, scent, ritual, and communal experience. These public expressions of myth helped maintain unity and identity. They reminded people of their place within a vast, divine pattern. While Sumerian myths emphasized humanity's vulnerability and the gods' unpredictable nature, Egyptian myths offered something more stable, the reassurance that the universe was fundamentally ordered and that individuals could maintain harmony through devotion, ethics, and ritual. Death, rather than an abrupt end, was a transition. Time was not a single line but a looping pattern, sunrise and sunset, flooding and planting, life and afterlife. At its core, Egyptian mythology expressed a profound reverence for continuity. Their gods were not just creators but caretakers. Their myths were not simply stories but anchors that held society steady through centuries of change. In the next part of this series, we will travel eastward into the ancient Indus Valley and early Vedic India, where myth takes on new themes: cosmic sound, sacred order, and the earliest roots of what would become Hindu tradition. Part 4. The Indus, the Vedas, and the early myths of India. Cosmic sound, sacred order, and the birth of the divine. To understand the earliest myths of the Indian subcontinent, one must picture a world unlike the river-fed plains of Egypt or the temple cities of Sumer. Instead, imagine vast stretches of fertile land along the Indus River, dotted with the well-planned cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. These were urban marvels built long before many other civilizations mastered the art of sanitation or standardized brickwork. Streets followed orderly grids, well-supplied clean water, and large public baths hint at cultural practices tied to purification and ritual. Yet what makes the Indus Valley so mysterious is how silent it is. The script of this ancient civilization remains undeciphered. Its myths, whatever names its gods bore, whatever stories were carved into the minds of its people, lie sealed behind symbols we cannot yet read. There are no surviving hymns, no creation stories etched into clay tablets, no epic poems to illuminate their cosmology. What we have instead are clues, seal stones depicting horned deities, carvings of animals arranged in symbolic patterns, an emphasis on water and ritual cleanliness, and architectural spaces that suggest gathering, ritual, and social cohesion. Even without deciphered texts, scholars infer that Indus religion contained seeds of ideas that would later flourish in Vedic India. The figure known as the Pashupati seal, depicting a seated, horned, possibly yogic figure surrounded by animals, may represent a protoform of Shiva. Patterns of fertility symbols suggest worship connected to motherhood, vegetation, and the cycle of seasons. But the deeper myths, how this civilization explained the cosmos, creation, and human purpose, remain hidden, like a story whispered behind a closed door. When the Indus civilization waned and Indo-Aryan cultures began spreading across northern India, a new mythological world blossomed, one preserved in some of humanity's oldest surviving sacred texts, the Vedas. The earliest of these, the Rig Veda, contains hymns that may date as early as 1500 BCE, making them among the oldest written mythic traditions still in use today. If Sumer gave writing to myth and Egypt gave structure, India gave myth philosophical depth, a sense that creation itself arises from something beyond form, beyond narrative, beyond gods in human shape. The earliest Vedic myths are not only stories but meditations, chants, and poetic reflections that invite listeners to contemplate the nature of existence. At the heart of these myths is the concept of Tar, the cosmic order. Before there was Dharma, before there was Karma, before the later philosophies of Hinduism fully emerged, there was this early idea that the universe is governed by an underlying, harmonious pattern. The stars move with purpose. The seasons follow cycles. Fire transforms offerings into smoke that rises toward heaven. Human actions have resonance beyond the physical world. This sense of order, both moral and cosmic, threads through nearly every myth. The Rig Veda offers several creation hymns, each presenting a different perspective on how the world began. These are not dogmatic statements but poetic explorations, revealing an intellectual curiosity unmatched in many early cultures. One of the most famous hymns is the Nasadiya Sukta, often called the Hymn of Creation. Its tone is introspective, almost philosophical rather than mythical. It describes a time before existence or non-existence, before the gods themselves came into being. There was neither non-existence nor existence then. There was neither the realm of space nor the sky beyond. The hymn wonders about creation not through narrative but through questioning. It suggests that before all things, there was a single breath or power, subtle, unseen, from which the universe emerged. It even proposes, in a moment astonishingly ahead of its time, that perhaps even the highest God does not fully know how creation occurred. In this way, early Indian myth embraces uncertainty as sacred, acknowledging the limits of human, and even divine, understanding. Another key creation myth is that of Purusha, the cosmic being whose body becomes the universe. In this hymn, Purusha is sacrificed by the gods in a grand ritual. From his mouth come the Brahmins, from his arms the warriors, from his thighs the merchants, and from his feet the workers. His eyes become the sun, his breath the wind, his head the sky. This myth is one of the earliest attempts to explain social structure, cosmic unity, and the interconnectedness of all things. It establishes humanity not as a separate creation but as part of the cosmos itself. The Vedic pantheon is vast and complex, filled with gods who embody forces of nature, abstract principles, or cosmic functions. Among them, a few stand out as central figures. Indra, the storm god and warrior, is the most celebrated deity in the Rig Veda. His stories reflect an ancient worldview shaped by dramatic weather patterns and the struggle to bring order from chaos. His most famous myth describes his battle with Vritra, a mighty serpent or dragon who held back the waters of the world. With his thunderbolt, Indra shatters the serpent and releases the rivers, allowing life to flourish. This theme, storm god defeating serpent of chaos, appears across cultures, but in the Vedas, it becomes tied to the larger framework of Tar. Indra restores order, not merely power. Another central figure is Agni, the god of fire. Fire was essential to Vedic ritual. It carried offerings to the gods, linked heaven and earth, and served as a witness to human oaths. Agni was at once a messenger, a purifier, and a divine presence that emerged in every hearth and ritual flame. Through Agni, humans communicated with the divine. He was a god who was always near, always accessible, always watching. Vayuna, the guardian of cosmic and moral order, occupied a special philosophical role. He represented the vastness of the sky and the deep waters, and his domain included truth, justice, and the unseen laws that governed the universe. Varuna's myths convey a sense of awe. He knows the path of the sun, the secrets of the night, the intentions of the human heart. While Indra's power is physical, Varuna's is moral and cosmic. Together, they illustrate a dual understanding of divine authority. The early myths of India also reflect humanity's ongoing questions about death and the afterlife. The Vedas describe the land of Yama, the first mortal to die and thus the ruler of the departed. Yet even here, the tone is not dreadful but contemplative. Yama's realm is quiet, a place of rest, guided by ancestral spirits. Death is a transition rather than an ending, echoing themes already present in prehistoric belief systems. What sets early Indian mythology apart is its integration of ritual, philosophy, and storytelling. The hymns were not separate from daily life. They were recited during ceremonies, chanted at dawn, offered beside sacred fires, and woven into the rhythms of society. Myth, ritual, and cosmic order formed a seamless whole. Over time, as the Vedic tradition evolved into the broader tapestry of Hindu mythology, these early ideas blossomed into narratives about Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Devi, and countless other deities. But the foundations, the concern with cosmic order, the fascination with creation, the interplay of sacrifice and renewal, were already present in these earliest myths. Part 4 reveals a world where myth transformed from simple narrative into deep, philosophical inquiry. The thinkers who composed the Rigveda were not just storytellers, they were poets, mystics, and observers of nature. Through metaphor and melody, they sought to understand the infinite. In Part 5, we will travel farther east into ancient China, where myth reflects mountains, rivers, ancestors, and the elegant balance of yin and yang. Part 5. The myths of ancient China. Cosmic balance, ancestral wisdom, and the shaping of heaven and earth. To step into the realm of ancient Chinese mythology is to enter a landscape shaped by mountains that pierce the clouds, rivers that coil like dragons through valleys, and skies that seem to stretch without end. The geography of early China, its winding waterways, fertile plains, dense forests, and sacred peaks, deeply influenced its earliest stories. As in other ancient cultures, myth began here long before writing, as whispered tales passed through generations. But China's unique worldview, centered on harmony, lineage, and the interplay of cosmic forces, gave its myths a distinct philosophical flavor even in their earliest forms. Unlike the dramatic cosmic battles of Mesopotamia or the cyclical resurrection themes of Egypt, early Chinese myth approached creation and the divine with a gentleness and quiet contemplation that would later echo through Taoism, Confucianism, and traditional Chinese philosophy. In these myths, creation emerges gradually, shaped by subtle forces rather than violent interventions. The universe's unfolding is serene, balanced, and governed by principles that mirror nature's rhythms. The primordial beginning, Hundan, and the chaos before heaven and earth. In many Chinese creation stories, the world begins not with a divine being forging land from water or slaying a monster of chaos, but simply with Hundan, an undifferentiated, misty, egg-like chaos. Hundan is a state of formlessness, neither dark nor light, neither earth nor sky. It represents pure potential, the quiet before the first breath of creation. This idea of a primordial, neutral, undefined beginning reflects early Chinese comfort with ambiguity. Creation is not a single explosive moment but a gentle separation of elements, like mist parting at dawn. Pangu, the first being and the shaping of the world. One of the best-known Chinese creation myths centers on Pangu, a giant being who was said to have grown inside the cosmic egg of chaos. As the story goes, for thousands of years, the egg contained all forces in perfect balance. But eventually, Pangu stirred, awakened, and with a mighty push, cracked the shell open. As he stood, the lighter elements drifted upward to form the heavens, while the heavier elements sank downward to create the earth. Every day for 18,000 years, Pangu grew taller, and the heavens rose with him, preventing them from collapsing back into unity. When his work was complete, Pangu lay down and died, his body becoming the world itself. His breath became the wind. His voice became thunder. His eyes became the sun and moon. His blood became rivers. His bones became mountains. His hair became forests. His sweat became rain. This myth, both poetic and serene, reflects a worldview in which humans, nature, and divinity are interconnected. The world is not something separate from life, it is life, shaped from the body of the first being. Every part of nature is touched by something sacred. Yet even this grand act of creation is not portrayed as violent. Pangu's transformation is natural, harmonious, and even gentle. His death is not tragic but necessary, echoing a theme common in early Chinese mythology: creation arises from quiet sacrifice rather than destruction. Nuwa, the mother goddess and the shaper of humanity. After the heavens and earth settled into place, the goddess Nuwa emerged. She is often depicted as a woman with the tail of a serpent or dragon, symbolizing creativity, fluidity, and connection to nature. Where Pangu shaped the world, Nuwa shaped life. One of her most beloved myths tells how she created humanity. As the story goes, Nuwa walked along the banks of a river and began forming people from clay. She molded them with her hands, shaping their limbs, smoothing their faces, and breathing life into them. These first humans were elegant and strong, crafted with care. But creating each one by hand took time, and Nuwa soon grew tired. So she dipped a cord or stick into the mud and flicked droplets across the ground. Wherever a droplet landed, a human sprang to life. According to tradition, the handcrafted figures became nobles and leaders, while the splattered droplets became ordinary laborers. This myth is not a statement of hierarchy so much as a gentle acknowledgement of diversity. It reflects early Chinese recognition that society contains many roles, each essential to the whole. In Nuwa's myth, creation is playful, artistic, and tender, a goddess shaping life with her own hands. Another story tells how Nuwa repaired the heavens themselves. When cosmic disorder threatened to tear the world apart, floods rising unchecked, the sky cracking open, Nuwa melted stones of 5 colors to patch the heavens and used the legs of a giant turtle to support the sky. Her actions restored balance, reinforcing her role as both creator and protector. Fuxi, the bringer of civilization. Nuwa's companion, Fuxi, is another foundational figure in Chinese mythology. Together, they are sometimes portrayed as sibling spouses, representing yin and yang, the dual forces that shape the universe. While Nuwa created life, Fuxi taught humans how to live. How to hunt and fish. How to cook food. How to domesticate animals. How to create musical instruments. How to divine the future. He is credited with developing the Bagua, the 8 trigrams used in divination and later incorporated into the I Ching, Book of Changes. These trigrams, made of broken and unbroken lines, symbolize fundamental natural patterns: heaven, earth, thunder, wind, fire, water, mountain, and lake. Through them, the early Chinese sought to understand the movements of energy in the world. In many ways, the myths of Nuer and Fuxi mirror the relationship between nature and culture. Nuer gives life. Fuxi teaches humanity how to shape that life into society. Together, they represent the harmony of creation and civilization, but always through gentle guidance, never coercion. The Yellow Emperor and the dawn of ancestral mythology. Another foundational figure in early Chinese myth is the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, a semi-divine ancestor who embodies wisdom, leadership, and cultural innovation. Unlike the cosmic beings who shape the world, Huangdi represents a bridge between the divine and human realms. He is part god, part king, part ancestor, and entirely central to Chinese cultural identity. Myths describe Huangdi as the inventor of the calendar, a master of medicine and herbs, a sage who spoke with gods, a leader who united warring tribes, a patron of music and technology. Stories of his life blend history and myth so seamlessly that distinguishing fact from legend is nearly impossible. Yet the value of these myths lies not in their literal truth but in how they shaped cultural memory. To the Chinese, Huangdi symbolized the ideal ruler, balanced, wise, and attuned to both heaven and earth. Yin and Yang, the mythic structure of reality. One of the most enduring contributions of early Chinese cosmology is the dual concept of yin and yang, forces that exist not as opposites but as complementary elements essential to harmony. Yin is darkness, softness, water, moon, earth, quietness. Yang is light, strength, fire, sun, sky, movement. Together, they create a world where balance is ideal, and imbalance leads to disorder. This dualism permeates nearly every Chinese myth, serving as a symbolic structure for understanding creation, nature, society, and even human emotion. While not a myth in the narrative sense, yin and yang are mythic principles that shape all storytelling. In China's oldest myths, creation is not a battle but a balancing act. Early Chinese myth as a window into the soul of a civilization. What makes ancient Chinese mythology uniquely soothing is its inherent calm. The stories rarely hinge on cosmic violence or divine competition. Instead, they emphasize harmony, transformation, cyclical renewal, the integration of humanity with nature, the wisdom of ancestors, the quiet power of balance. Myth here is not merely storytelling but a philosophy of life, a guide to living gently within the world's natural rhythms. As we leave ancient China behind, we carry with us a sense of serenity. Stories shaped not by fear of chaos but by trust in the universe's capacity for order and renewal. Part 6. The Minoans, Mycenaeans, and early Greek myths. Serpents, labyrinths, and the whispering birth of Western storytelling. Long before the familiar gods of Mount Olympus came to dominate Western imagination, the ancient Greek world was shaped by two earlier civilizations, the mysterious Minoans and the bold, warrior-like Mycenaeans. Their stories, rituals, and symbols flowed together over centuries, weaving the early threads of what would eventually become the mythological tapestry of classical Greece. And although later poets would refine these myths into tales of thunderbolts and heroic quests, their oldest forms were far quieter, more symbolic, more rooted in earth and sea, and much closer to the gentle rhythms of nature. This part of our journey invites you to imagine a world before Homer, before the Parthenon, before Zeus or Athena were given their final forms. A world where old myth still shimmered with the soft glow of half-remembered rituals, where nature was alive with spirits, and where the line between humanity and divinity remained thin and permeable. Let the pace slow as we step back into this ancient Aegean world. A place where religion took shape in shady caves, sacred mountaintops, and winding labyrinthine halls lit by flickering oil lamps. The Minoans are a civilization of quiet mystery. The first great society to rise in the Aegean was the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete, flourishing from around 2600 to 1400 BCE. Unlike many Bronze Age cultures known for warfare and conquest, the Minoans left behind few images of war. Instead, their art depicts flowing lines, peaceful scenes, and natural landscapes alive with movement, leaping dolphins, slender lilies, spirals that echo waves and winds. Their architecture features vast, open palaces filled with light wells and multi-level rooms, spaces where air and sun moved freely. The Minoans worshipped a pantheon that was heavily centered around female divinities, especially a powerful great goddess figure. Little of their mythology survives in written form, since we still cannot fully decipher their script, known as Linear A. But archaeology and later Greek myth provide meaningful clues. Figurines show women holding serpents, raising their arms in blessing, or standing beside sacred animals. These symbols point to themes of regeneration, fertility, and cyclical harmony with the natural world. One of the most iconic Minoan symbols is the labyrinth, later immortalized in the story of the Minotaur. But in the earliest Minoan context, the labyrinth was likely not a prison nor a place of terror. Instead, it may have been a sacred pattern, an emblem of spiritual journey, rebirth, and the winding nature of life itself. The idea of descending into a twisting space and emerging change fits beautifully into the Minoan worldview, which emphasized transformation rather than punishment. Imagine standing inside a Minoan palace as soft light pours down from an opening carved high above. The walls are painted with swirling reds and blues, the air filled with fragrant incense. It is not difficult to believe that this world understood myth not as a distant, formal story, but as a living presence found in every room, every ritual, every breath. The Mycenaeans, the age of heroes, begins. While the Minoans cultivated peace and ritual harmony, the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece developed a culture more closely tied to warfare, kingship, and heroic identity. Rising to power around 1600 BCE, the Mycenaeans built fortified citadels on high hilltops, Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, each centered around a grand megaron hall where rulers sat upon elevated thrones. Their art, unlike the soft, flowing forms of the Minoans, depicted chariots, hunting scenes, and warrior imagery. Yet the Mycenaeans also absorbed enormous influence from the Minoans. They adopted their writing system, transforming it into Linear B, which we can now read. Incorporated Minoan religious symbols, and blended their myths into a new emerging tradition. Many of the early Greek gods, Zeus, Poseidon, Hera, and others, appear in Mycenaean records, showing that the foundation of Greek mythology already existed more than 1,000 years before Homer wrote his epics. It was in this period that the earliest forms of Greek heroic legends took shape. Tales of figures like Heracles, Perseus, and Theseus may trace their roots to Mycenaean rulers or warriors, whose exploits later grew into myth. In this world, myth and history blurred gently together. A fallen king could, over generations, become a semi-divine hero. A real palace could evolve into the legendary home of gods. The fusion of two worlds, birth of Greek myth. As the Mycenaeans flourished, their culture intertwined deeply with the Minoan world. The result was a beautiful fusion. The ritual symbolism of the Minoans merged with the heroic storytelling instincts of the Mycenaeans, forming something unique and lasting. One powerful example of this fusion is the myth of the labyrinth and the Minotaur. In its later Greek form, the story tells of King Minos, the monstrous Minotaur, and the hero Theseus navigating the complex labyrinth with the help of Ariadne's thread. But some scholars believe the roots of this myth lie in Minoan ceremonies involving dancers wearing bull masks, symbolizing renewal or communion with divine forces. Over centuries, what may have originally been a spiritual ritual transformed into a dramatic story of heroism and escape. This blending process is typical of early Greek myth development. Stories were not static, they evolved, grew, and adapted to each generation's needs. In Minoan times, the bull was sacred, a symbol of strength, fertility, and cosmic cycles. But in the Mycenaean era, which valued heroic conquest, the bull became a challenge to overcome. Through this transformation we glimpse how mythic meaning shifted alongside cultural change. The role of nature in early Greek storytelling. Before Greek myth became populated by the Olympian gods we now know, nature itself played a leading role. Early Greek mythologies, shaped by both the Minoans and Mycenaeans, portrayed nature as alive with spirits and divine energies. Springs housed nymphs. Mountains were home to ancestral gods. Winds and storms carried moods of the divine. Caves served as womb-like entrances to the realm of mystery. The sea, especially, was a constant presence. For the Minoans, the ocean was life itself, a source of food, trade, connection, and danger. Their art shows dolphins leaping gracefully, octopuses curling lovingly around vases, and ships gliding across calm waters. For the Mycenaeans, the sea became a path to war and exploration, inspiring early ideas of heroic voyages that would later evolve into the tales of Jason and Odysseus. These early myths whisper a timeless message: nature was never separate from life. It was divine, immediate, and ever-present, something to respect, fear, and cherish. The emergence of divine archetypes. During this long period of mythic blending, the earliest versions of what would become the Greek gods began to form. But they were not yet the human-like figures of later myths. Instead, they were elemental forces, more akin to natural principles than personalities. A sky father who controlled storms. An earth mother who nurtured grain. A sea god whose mood shaped fate. A sun deity who watched all things. These proto-divinities were not simply beings. They were reflections of natural powers and human hopes. Over centuries, they would take on stories, relationships, and identities, eventually forming the pantheon we recognize today. But here, in these earliest stages, they were gentle, mysterious, and profoundly symbolic. A sleeping echo of what Greek myth would become. Part 6 is a quiet part of the human mythic journey. It lies in the shadows of prehistory, where Minoan priestesses raised their arms beneath sacred lightning, where Mycenaean kings recited tales in smoky halls, and where myths drifted between cultures like sea breezes. In this early Aegean world, myth was not entertainment. Myth was not yet formalized. Myth was not yet written. It was something softer, something lived, something felt. A whisper passed from mother to child, from priest to initiate, from sailor to sailor as stars shimmered above Aegean waters. And as we drift from this world into the next, the myths will become larger, clearer, and more familiar. For in Part 7, we enter the age of Hesiod and Homer, the era when Greek mythology finally steps into the light and becomes the foundation of Western storytelling. Part 7. Hesiod, Homer, and the birth of the Greek mythic universe. As we drift gently forward in time, the soft, symbolic myths of the Minoans and Mycenaeans begin to crystallize into something more structured, more sweeping, and far more recognizable. For it is here, in the shadowy centuries after the Bronze Age collapse, that the Greek world reorganizes itself. From its quiet fragments, a literary and mythic revolution emerges. And at the heart of that revolution stand two great names: Hesiod and Homer. Their works are not merely poems. They are foundations, pillars upon which nearly all of Greek mythology rests. Before them, myth existed mostly in scattered oral traditions, drifting like clouds through villages and courts, shaped differently in every region. After them, myth took on form and coherence, gathering into an ordered cosmos filled with gods, genealogies, moral lessons, and unforgettable heroes. So part 7 is a slow, gentle descent into this formative era. A time when myths step out of shadow and into storytelling, when cosmic order is defined on parchment and papyrus, and when the divine world becomes both grander and more intricate than ever before. Settle in, breathe softly, and let the world of ancient Greek poetry unfold. The Greek Dark Age, a quiet soil for future myths. To understand the impact of Hesiod and Homer, it helps to imagine the world in which they lived. After the Mycenaean palaces fell around 1200 BCE, Greece entered a long period known as the Dark Age, though the name is misleading. It was not a time of complete gloom, but rather one of decentralization, migration, and simplicity. Writing disappeared. Monumental architecture faded. Communities grew smaller, more isolated. Life became local again. But in this quieter world, stories flourished. Without palaces or administrative centers, oral tradition became the lifeblood of culture. Elders, poets, bards, and traveling storytellers kept memories alive. They carried with them tales of ancient kings, fallen heroes, divine quarrels, and the distant grandeur of Mycenaean days. These stories shifted with each retelling, absorbing regional flavors, local dialects, and personal embellishments. By the time writing returned to Greece around the 8th century BCE, these floating stories had grown rich, layered, and varied. They needed structure. They needed voice. And this is where Hesiod and Homer enter. Hesiod, the architect of cosmic order. Imagine a solitary farmer poet living in the quiet countryside of Boeotia. His name is Hesiod, and he is not a courtly bard like his later counterpart Homer. Instead, he is a man of the land, shaped by the rhythms of agriculture, the cycles of nature, and the hardship of rural life. His poems speak with a grounded simplicity, a desire to understand not only the gods but the moral fabric of the world. Hesiod composed two works that would define Greek cosmology. 1. The Theogony. This poem is the earliest surviving blueprint of how the universe and the gods came into being. Before Hesiod, divine genealogies existed only in fragmented local stories. Hesiod pulls them together into one sweeping narrative, beginning with the void, chaos, and unfolding into earth, sky, titans, Olympians, and all the creatures and forces in between. Through his soothing verse, the cosmos takes shape. From chaos emerges Gaia. From Gaia comes Uranus. From them the Titans. And from the Titans, through struggle and succession, the Olympians arise. This is not simply mythology. It is cosmology, philosophy, and moral framework intertwined. 2. Works and Days. In this poem, Hesiod turns from the heavens to human life. He describes the struggles of farming, the importance of justice, the seasons, the nature of toil, and the myth of Pandora, the first woman, whose jar, later called a box, unleashed hardship upon humankind. Where theogony explains divine origins, works and days explains human ones. Together, they give the Greek world both structure and meaning. Hesiod's voice is gentle, steady, almost fatherly. He brings a sense of order to myth that allows future generations to anchor themselves not in isolated stories but in a coherent worldview. Homer, the bard who sang the heroic soul. If Hesiod is the architect of cosmic order, Homer is the architect of heroic identity. His two great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, rise from centuries of oral tradition, but through Homer they become masterworks of literature. Imagine the world of Homer. A hall filled with listeners leaning in close, firelight reflecting off bronze shields hung on walls. A bard with a lyre at his knee, his voice flowing like a river. And through his songs, myths burst into life with vivid emotional intensity. The Iliad. Though centered on the Trojan War, the Iliad is not truly about battle. It is about the nature of human anger, honor, grief, and fate. Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, becomes the lens through which the fragility of life and the weight of divine influence are explored. Here the gods are active, intervening, arguing, guiding, and deceiving. Mortals and immortals are intertwined in drama, reminding listeners that even heroes must bow to destiny. The Odyssey. The Odyssey gently shifts tone. It is a wandering, dreamlike story of homecoming and resilience. Odysseus travels from island to island, encountering witches, monsters, nymphs, storms, and the ever-present whims of gods. But beneath the enchantment lies a story of perseverance and longing. Together, the Iliad and the Odyssey infuse Greek myth with emotional depth. They create archetypes, the brave hero, the loyal wife, the wise old man, the trickster, echoes that still shape storytelling today. Oral tradition becomes literature. One of the most soothing aspects of early Greek myth is the knowledge that it was sung before it was written. Hesiod and Homer may be the first names attached to Greek literature, but behind them lies a long lineage of anonymous tellers. Their voices ripple through the verses like soft harmonies beneath a melody. The poems were composed in dactylic hexameter, a rhythm that lulls the mind into calmness. Even today, when translated into modern languages, a quiet musicality lingers in their lines. It is easy to imagine shepherds reciting them to the clouds, sailors whispering them to the sea, parents passing them on to their children at night. When these poems were finally written down, likely in the 7th or 6th century BCE, they did more than preserve myth. They stabilized it. They created a shared cultural memory that stretched from village to village, island to island. Greek identity began to form, not politically or geographically, but mythically. Gods who feel human, humans who touch the divine. One of the most distinctive features of early Greek myth in the Homeric era is how human the gods become. They argue, laugh, fear, love, deceive, and grow jealous. They intervene, not as distant cosmic principles but as characters with personalities and desires. And yet, they remain divine, immortal, radiant, powerful. This blending of human and divine traits creates a mythic world that feels intimate and accessible. Ordinary people could imagine interacting with gods, praying to them, being noticed by them. In Homer, a soldier may receive encouragement from Athena herself. A king may be punished by Zeus for arrogance. A wanderer may find both love and danger in the arms of a goddess like Circe or Calypso. This humanization of the divine becomes one of the most enduring features of Greek mythology. It sets the stage for future stories, tragedies, comedies, hymns, philosophical texts that explore the relationship between mortals and immortals in endlessly rich ways. The legacy of Hesiod and Homer, a mythic foundation set in stone. By the close of Part 7, the Greek mythological world is no longer a series of scattered tales. It has become ordered through genealogy, emotional through epic poetry, cultural through shared storytelling, philosophical through questions of fate, justice, and mortality. Hesiod gives the Greeks their cosmic scaffolding. Homer gives them their soul. Every later myth, whether of Persephone's descent, Dionysus' revelry, Heracles' labors, or Oedipus's fate, flows from a mythic universe shaped by these two early poets. They breathe life into the divine and give rhythm to heroic memory. And through their works, mythology becomes not just a set of stories, but a way of understanding the world, one that continues to whisper across the centuries. Part 8. The Babylonian myths, Enuma Elish, Epic of Gilgamesh, and the dawn of moral storytelling. There is a certain hush that falls over history when we speak of ancient Babylon. A hush like that of sand shifting along the banks of the slow-moving Euphrates. A hush like the breath of clay tablets resting in the dark of forgotten archives. A hush like the quiet heartbeat of a civilization that shaped time, writing, and the earliest memories of myth. Tonight, in Part 8, we descend gently into the world of Babylonian mythology. It is a world of gods older than empires, stories carved into tablets more permanent than stone, and human questions as timeless as the stars over the Mesopotamian plain. Babylon did not just inherit myths from Sumer and Akkad, it reshaped them, wove them into its own identity, and carried them forward into the spiritual imagination of later civilizations. And so, as you settle deeper into rest, allow the soft rhythm of ancient tales to guide you. The city where myth became memory. Babylon was not always a mighty empire. It began as a modest riverside town. But over time, through kings like Hammurabi and later Nebuchadnezzar II, it became a symbolic center of Mesopotamian culture. What made Babylon unique was not just its political power but its relationship to writing and record-keeping. Where other civilizations let myths drift through oral tradition, Babylon pressed them into clay, solidifying them in a way unmatched by earlier cultures. Because of this, Babylon provides some of the oldest written myths in human history. These stories, preserved for millennia, serve as windows into the earliest human attempts to understand the universe. The most famous of these stories fall into two towering traditions. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's great creation myth. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest heroic journeys ever recorded. Both of these works shimmer with symbolism, emotion, and a deep yearning to grasp life's mysteries. Enuma Elish, the cosmic battle that built the world. The Enuma Elish opens with a line so gentle and primordial that it feels like the first whisper of existence. When the heavens above had not been named. It describes a time before land, before sky, before gods with personalities or purpose. In the beginning, there were only two swirling, mingling waters, Apsu, the fresh water, and Tiamat, the saltwater sea. Together they formed a cosmic womb, out of which early gods emerged like bubbles rising from the deep. But as these younger gods grew loud and restless, their noise disturbed Apsu. His desire was simple, silence. His solution, however, was violent. He planned to destroy his own divine offspring. Tiamat hesitated. She was both primordial mother and endless sea, capable of rage but also compassion. Yet the younger gods learned of Apsu's plan and struck first, killing him. This act created a rift, cosmic and emotional, that would echo through the rest of the myth. Into this unfolding drama rose Marduk, a young storm god destined to become Babylon's patron deity. With wind swirling at his command and lightning in his hands, Marduk confronted Tiamat after she transformed into a monstrous embodiment of chaos. Their battle was fierce, echoing the stormy tantrums of weather over the Mesopotamian plains. In the end, Marduk split Tiamat's body in two. One half became the sky. The other half became the earth. From her corpse, the ordered world emerged. And from the blood of a rebellious god, Marduk created human beings, not as free agents, but as helpers to the gods, bearing the burden of labor. This myth, both violent and majestic, reveals a worldview in which order is born from struggle, structure from chaos, and humanity from divine conflict. It mirrors the ancient perception of life as a delicate balance between stability and the unpredictable forces of nature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity searches for meaning. If the Enuma Elish explains creation, the Epic of Gilgamesh explains life. It remains one of the oldest surviving literary works, written down on clay tablets more than 4,000 years ago. But its emotional depth feels uncannily modern. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, begins the tale as a figure of overwhelming strength and unrestrained pride. To temper him, the gods send Enkidu, a wild man shaped from clay and raised by animals. Their friendship becomes the emotional core of the story, two beings, one civilized and one untamed, recognizing themselves in each other. Together they embark on heroic adventures, slay monsters, defy gods, and carve their stories into the world. But then tragedy strikes. Enkidu dies, and in his grief, Gilgamesh is transformed. This is one of the first stories in history where a hero confronts mortality, not the death of others, but his own. Gilgamesh journeys far beyond the edges of the known world, seeking answers from immortals, wandering through dark mountains, crossing the cosmic waters. Each step brings him closer to understanding a truth that is both painful and comforting. Humans are mortal. But through wisdom, compassion, and legacy, life gains meaning. The epic gently whispers a message that would echo through countless later myths. That fear of death is universal, but the search for purpose is what defines us. Myth as moral compass. Unlike the more symbolic myths of the Paleolithic or the ritual-centered myths of the early Neolithic, Babylonian myths introduce something new, ethical reflection. In these stories, gods reward justice, punish arrogance, and struggle with emotions. Humans grapple with questions. What does it mean to be a good ruler? What gives life value? Why do suffering and death exist? Early Mesopotamian cultures, especially Babylon, used myth not only to explain the cosmos but to guide behavior. Kings invoked Marduk or Shamash not merely for divine legitimacy but as standards of righteousness. Farmers and families looked to myths for explanations of cycles they could not control. This merging of myth with morality would later influence Hebrew scripture, Greek philosophy, and Abrahamic religions. Babylon quietly planted the seeds that would grow into some of humanity's most enduring ethical frameworks. The quiet emotional weight of ancient stories. What is striking about Babylonian mythology is its emotional realism. Even in a world populated by gods and monsters, the deepest conflicts are human ones. Enkidu's loneliness before meeting Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's grief after losing him. Tiamat's sorrow at the betrayal of her children. The god's fear of human noise in the flood narrative. The tragic attempts of mortals to grasp immortality. These are not simply supernatural tales. They are meditations on longing, loss, courage, and the fear of the unknown. They remind us that even 4,000 years ago, humans felt the same deep emotions we feel now. And in this shared emotional language, we find the power of myth not as history but as connection. A way for ancient voices to speak gently into the quiet of our own lives. Humans, gods, and the search for balance. Babylonian myths present a world where humans and gods coexist uneasily. Humanity often appears fragile, created to serve divine needs, yet capable of extraordinary bravery and wisdom. Gods may be powerful, but they are not omniscient or morally perfect. They make mistakes. They argue. They regret. This blurring of boundaries between human and divine is one of the oldest narrative mechanisms humans developed to understand themselves. If gods can act with emotion and error, then humans can relate to them, speak to them, and ask them for guidance. And perhaps, in doing so, humans can also better understand their own hopes and flaws. The legacy that echoed across civilizations. The myths of Babylon would echo far beyond their time. Their flood narratives appear in later Hebrew texts. Their cosmology influenced Greek thought. Their kingship models shaped Middle Eastern and Mediterranean traditions. Even today, phrases like seeking immortality, heroes' journeys, or creation from chaos trace their roots back to these ancient narratives. Part 8 marks a turning point in our 20-part journey. Here, myth becomes not only the story of gods and worlds but of human hearts. Part 9. The ancient Hebrew myths, origins, covenant, and the birth of ethical monotheism. There are moments in human history where myth does more than explain the world. There are rare turning points when myth becomes philosophy, when narrative becomes law, and when the story of one people reshapes the spiritual imagination of countless generations. Tonight, in Part 9, we drift softly into one of these turning points. The ancient Hebrew myths, among the most influential narrative traditions ever preserved. These stories, rooted in deserts, shepherding cultures, mountain encounters, and nomadic migrations, were shaped by a small people living in a narrow strip of land between great empires. Yet the myths they preserved in early scripture would echo across millennia, forming the foundations of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They would alter how humanity imagined the divine, how societies defined morality, and how individuals understood their responsibilities in the world. As you relax and settle deeply into the steady rhythm of this journey, let the ancient voices of early Hebrew storytellers guide you through tales of creation, covenant, trial, and hope. These are myths told not for spectacle, but for purpose, myths that sought to frame the relationship between humans and a single, morally attentive God. Let us move gently now into their world. A new vision of creation. The Hebrew creation myth, written in its earliest form thousands of years ago, offers a strikingly different vision from the myths of neighboring civilizations. Where Babylonian stories centered on cosmic battles and violent origins, the Hebrew myth presents creation as a calm, deliberate act. In the beginning, the text begins, as though inviting its listeners to settle into a kind of cosmic stillness. There is no war among gods. No corpse split to form the sky. No chaos monster subdued through force. Instead, the world emerges from speech. A single divine voice, commanding light, sky, water, land, stars, animals, and finally humanity into existence. Each act of creation is measured, intentional, almost serene. Let there be light. And there was light. And it was good. This refrain becomes a rhythm, a heartbeat of order, creation as harmony rather than conflict. This represents one of the earliest examples of a monotheistic creation myth, one in which the universe is crafted by one being whose will is sovereign. In this worldview, creation is not an accident or byproduct, it is meaningful. It is purposeful. And, perhaps most importantly, human beings are not created as servants to gods, as in Mesopotamia. They are created in the image of the divine, endowed with dignity, creativity, and responsibility. For the ancient Hebrews, creation was not a battlefield. It was a covenantal beginning. Adam, Eve, and the first human story. Among the earliest Hebrew myths is the tale of Adam and Eve, a story that has resonated deeply across millennia. But here, as we explore it in the soft light of a sleep-friendly reflection, we focus on its symbolic richness rather than dogma. This myth is less concerned with the mechanics of biology and more with the universal human experience. Curiosity, desire, consequence, and the fragile beauty of freedom. Adam and Eve live in a garden of abundance, a place where work is meaningful rather than burdensome, and where humanity and nature coexist in harmony. They walk with their God in the cool of the day, a poetic image suggesting closeness and peace. But the myth quietly asks a profound question. What does it mean to have free will? The forbidden fruit is not merely temptation, it is the opportunity for choice. And once choice enters the human story, so does complexity. With knowledge comes awareness, with awareness comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes the reality of suffering. The tale reflects the earliest Hebrew attempts to understand why life contains hardship, why humans struggle, why relationships fracture, and why mortality is inevitable. Rather than blame or shame, the myth offers perspective. Life is a journey of self-discovery, one in which humans constantly navigate the tension between innocence and experience. Noah and the Flood, a story of renewal. Flood myths ripple across the world, from Mesopotamia to China to the Americas, but the Hebrew flood myth adds a unique moral dimension. It portrays a world filled with human violence and corruption, a world out of balance. And in this story, the divine chooses not destruction alone but renewal. Noah becomes a symbol of resilience, obedience, and hope. He builds an ark not out of heroism but faith. He gathers the animals, endures the storm, and emerges into a cleansed world where creation begins again. But the most important part of the story happens after the rain stops. A covenant is formed. A rainbow appears. And the divine voice promises never again to destroy all life by flood. This is one of the earliest recorded moments in mythological history when a god binds himself to an oath, limiting divine power for the sake of humanity. It marks a shift in the ancient world's understanding of the divine, not a capricious being of storms and tempests, but a deity capable of restraint, relationship, and commitment. Abraham and the birth of covenant mythology. The stories of Abraham represent a turning point in human myth. They describe not a pantheon of gods interacting with humans, but one God forming a relationship with one man, and through him, an entire people. Abraham is not a warrior hero. He performs no miraculous feats. Instead, his heroism lies in trust. He leaves his homeland, journeys into the unknown, and places his faith in promises that will take generations to fulfill. The idea that a god would bind himself to humans through a formal covenant, an agreement, was revolutionary. It introduced several transformative concepts. That history has direction. That individuals matter to the divine. That morality is part of the human-divine relationship. That faith is not blind but relational. For a small nomadic people living in the shadow of powerful empires, this myth gave them a sense of identity and purpose. They were part of a story larger than themselves. Moses, Exodus, and the myth of liberation. Though rooted in historical memory, the Exodus myth functions on a symbolic level as well. It is the story of a people moving from oppression to freedom, from chaos to order, from servitude to nationhood. It becomes a foundational myth not just for Hebrews but for countless cultures that would later draw inspiration from its themes. The burning bush, the plagues, the parted sea. These are dramatic elements, but the deeper significance lies in the message that a God cares about the suffering of the oppressed. This myth reframed divinity as moral rather than purely powerful. The giving of the Ten Commandments introduced a new dimension. Law not as imperial decree, but as ethical guidance. A society built on justice rather than fear. A people united not only by blood but by values. In this sense, the Hebrew myths contributed not just religious ideas but early foundations of moral philosophy. The Hebrew contribution to world mythology. What sets ancient Hebrew myths apart is not their age but their emphasis on ethical monotheism, human responsibility, moral progress, covenant and relationship, hope amid suffering. Instead of gods driven by rivalry or impulse, these myths frame divinity as intentional, purposeful, and deeply connected to humanity's moral development. Instead of humans being pawns in cosmic struggles, these stories present humans as partners, fallible, fragile, but essential to the unfolding narrative. Despite their small numbers and modest land, the Hebrew people preserved their stories with extraordinary devotion. These myths would ultimately shape the Western world and profoundly influence how billions of people understand purpose, justice, and the nature of existence. A soft reflection before we drift onward. As we close Part 9, let the gentle rhythm of these early stories settle into your mind. They are not merely religious texts, but windows into how one ancient people sought meaning in hardship, sought order in chaos, and sought relationship in a world that often seemed vast and uncertain. Their myths comforted them on long desert nights. And tonight, in this quiet moment, they comfort us as well. Part 10. The myths of ancient Greece, titans, gods, and the quiet birth of human curiosity. When we think of ancient mythology, Greek stories often come to mind first: Zeus with his thunderbolt, Athena rising in armor, Poseidon stirring the sea. Yet the earliest Greek myths, far older than the refined tales preserved in classical literature, carry a very different flavor. They are raw, elemental, and deeply intertwined with the rugged landscapes the early Greeks called home. Tonight, we drift gently into these foundational stories and explore how they shaped human imagination, philosophy, and identity. But let this exploration unfold slowly, like a soft breeze moving across olive groves at dusk. We focus not on the drama, but on the quiet currents beneath the myths, the longing to understand nature, the search for balance in a world both beautiful and unpredictable, and the human impulse to give shape to the unknown. Settle comfortably as we cross the threshold into this world of mountains, islands, winds, and stars. The primordial beings, when the world was still forming. Before the Olympians, before the Titans, before gods walked the peaks of Mount Olympus, the earliest Greek myths spoke of abstract forces. Unlike the personified deities that would later become central to Greek religion, these primordial beings were more like poetic expressions of natural truth. First there was chaos, a word that originally meant not disorder, but a gap, an opening, a yawning expanse. It was the stillness before movement, the silence before sound. From chaos emerged Gaia, the earth herself, steady and fertile. She needed no creator. She simply was, the way the land beneath one's feet feels eternal. Gaia gave rise to Uranus, the sky, a vast dome of stars resting upon her earthly body. Their union formed the first cosmic pairing of earth and sky, a motif seen across many ancient mythologies. From them came the Titans, powerful beings who embodied the contours of the natural world, mountains, oceans, memory, light, and mortal time. These early myths reflect the Greek relationship with nature. Their land was filled with sharp contrasts, steep cliffs, stormy seas, fertile plains, and dark forests. To explain such a varied world, their myths needed range. Thus, their earliest deities were neither simply benevolent nor wholly destructive. They were forces to be respected, forces that shaped the world without human consent. So even before stories had characters, Greek mythology offered an emotional landscape, awe, respect, curiosity. The Titans and the shaping of the cosmos. The Titans, though later overshadowed by their Olympian descendants, were essential to the Greek worldview. Kronos, the Titan of time, embodied the cyclical patterns that governed ancient life. Time was not linear in early Greek thought, it was a loop, a rhythm that mirrored the turning of seasons, the growth and decay of crops, and the repetition of human generations. Prometheus, another Titan, stood apart, not as a brute force, but as a thinker, a figure associated with foresight and ingenuity. His stories would become central to later ethical reflections on human progress, knowledge, and responsibility. But the myth that most captures the transition from primordial power to a more structured cosmos is the Titanomachy, the great war between Titans and the rising generation of Olympian gods. Though sometimes portrayed as violent, in the sleep-friendly clarity we use tonight, the story becomes symbolic rather than dramatic. It represents change. It represents renewal. It represents the dawning of a new cosmic order. Just as earlier cultures imagined creation as a struggle between order and chaos, the Greeks framed cosmic development as the replacement of one generation by another. But here, the new order, led by Zeus, brings not just force but organization, hierarchy, and purpose. Through this myth, early Greeks expressed something deeply human, the sense that each generation must reshape the world in its own image, while still honoring what came before. Zeus and the Olympian vision of divinity. Zeus is often remembered as a thunder-wielding king, but in the earliest layers of Greek mythology, he is more than a ruler, he is a symbol of equilibrium. Zeus is not the creator of the world but its stabilizer. His main role is to maintain cosmic balance, ensuring that the universe remains orderly. Unlike many earlier gods of the ancient world who were distant or inscrutable, Zeus was portrayed as deeply involved in human affairs. He observed oaths, protected travelers, judged wrongs, and rewarded justice. In this way, the Greek myths moved toward a new idea, gods as guardians of moral order. This shift reveals much about early Greek society. They were developing political structures, city-states, councils, courts, and their myths reflected this emerging cultural complexity. Zeus became not merely the god of thunder but the god of law, civic life, and natural justice. This marked a profound shift in mythological development. Divinity was evolving into something more human in character, something relatable, something morally engaged. The birth of Athena, wisdom takes shape. One of the most quietly enchanting myths of early Greece is the birth of Athena, goddess of wisdom. Unlike many ancient deities, Athena is not born from chaos or violence. She emerges from the head of Zeus, fully formed and armored, the embodiment of intelligence, clarity, and strategic thought. But beneath the vivid imagery lies a symbolic truth. The Greeks revered thought, rationality, reason, the ability to plan and anticipate. Athena's birth represents the emergence of intellect as a divine force. She becomes a protector of heroes, a guide for cities, a symbol of balanced strength. In a world full of uncertainty, storms at sea, political rivalries, shifting alliances, Athena embodied an ideal, calm, thoughtful, perceptive. Humans could not control fate, but through wisdom they could navigate it. The rise of human curiosity. What makes Greek mythology distinct from earlier traditions is its embrace of questioning. The Greeks did not merely accept their myths, they reinterpreted them, debated them, reshaped them in poetry, philosophy, and art. This openness to reinterpretation gave their myths unusual longevity. They could adapt to new eras, new political systems, new philosophical ideas. Myths became tools for thinking, not just stories for entertainment. This is clear in the myth of Prometheus, who defies the gods to bring fire to humans. Fire symbolizes knowledge, creativity, and technological advancement. Through this myth, early Greeks explored the tension between divine authority and human potential. Prometheus's suffering. Bound to a rock, visited by an eagle, echoes through history not because of its violence but because of its symbolism. Knowledge has consequences. Progress requires sacrifice. Humanity is caught between its aspirations and its limitations. These reflections reveal why Greek mythology became foundational not only to Western literature but to Western thought itself. It invited interpretation. It invited contemplation. The Greek relationship with fate. Another defining feature of early Greek myth is the concept of Moira, or fate. Even the gods do not fully escape the power of the fates, the three ancient beings who measure, spin, and cut the thread of each life. This idea introduced a gentle but profound philosophical tension. Where does human choice end and destiny begin? How much of life is shaped by our own actions? How much is shaped by the unseen patterns of the universe? These are questions that continue to echo through human history. But in the quiet tone of ancient myth, they offer comfort rather than worry. There is reassurance in the notion that life flows within a larger design, that our struggles and joys are part of a tapestry too vast for any single person to see. The mythic roots of an intellectual revolution. Part 10 closes as we reflect on how early Greek myths laid the groundwork for something extraordinary, the birth of Western philosophy. Thinkers like Thales, Heraclitus, and Pythagoras did not reject myth, they grew from it, using narrative frameworks to explore deeper truths about reality, nature, and the human condition. In this way, Greek myth is both ancient and timeless. It bridges imagination and inquiry, emotion and logic, poetry and reason. It tells us not only how ancient people saw the world, but how they learned to ask questions about it. Tonight, as you drift further into relaxation, allow these myths to settle around you like soft moonlight on the Aegean Sea, reminding you of humanity's enduring curiosity and impulse as old as the first stories told beside firelight. Part 11. Norse mythology, the 9 worlds, the world tree, and the quiet strength of fate. To slip into the old Norse myths is to step into a world both stark and poetic, shaped by long winters, vast forests, and restless seas. Unlike the warm river valleys of earlier civilizations, the northern lands demanded resilience, preparedness, and imagination equal to the storms that battered their shores. As a result, Norse myth is carved not in soft clay or papyrus, but in the mind. It is raw, powerful, and strangely comforting. Tonight, we wander softly into the earliest layers of the Norse stories, exploring their cosmic structure, their ancient gods, and their somber but beautiful understanding of fate. These myths bring us closer to a world where the night sky feels vast and alive, where every wind carries a whisper of the divine, and where life's fragility is acknowledged, yet courageously met. Let the candlelight flicker gently in your imagination. Let the sound of distant waves ease your breathing. This is a mythology not of triumph but of endurance, and in its quiet strength, it feels uniquely suited for sleep. The world tree, ye graceful and the structure of existence. At the heart of Norse cosmology stands Yggdrasil, the world tree. It is not a metaphor or symbol within the myth, it is the myth. All things exist in relation to this enormous ash tree whose branches stretch into the heavens and whose roots reach deep into mysterious realms. Yggdrasil supports 9 worlds, each home to different beings. Asgard, realm of the easy gods. Vanaheim, home of the Vani gods, associated with fertility and wisdom. Alfheim, home of the radiant light elves. Midgard, the world of humans. Jotunheim, land of the giants. Nidavella or Svartalfheim, where dwarfs crafted wonders. Niflheim, realm of mist, cold, and ancient ice. Muspelheim, land of primal fire. Helheim, where many souls journey after death. Unlike some mythologies that place mortals at the center of creation, Norse myth gives humanity only one portion of the cosmic landscape. Midgard is simply a world among many, protected but not privileged. This perspective reflects a deep humility before the forces of nature, a recognition that humans exist within a broader, unpredictable order. Every day, Yggdrasil endures hardship. Deer nibble its leaves. Serpents gnaw its roots. A squirrel races back and forth delivering insults between creatures that will never meet. The tree groans under the weight of existence, yet it stands. This portrayal mirrors the Norse understanding of life, fragile but persistent, threatened but enduring. Ginnungagap and the birth of the cosmos. Before Yggdrasil, before the worlds, before gods, there was Ginnungagap, a vast, silent void. To one side lay Niflheim, a place of frost and mist. To the other, Muspelheim, a realm of fire and heat. When these extremes met in the gap between them, creation began. The melting ice formed rivers and droplets that took shape as the giant Ymir, from whose body all later beings descended. This myth, unlike many others across the world, does not begin with intention or command. Creation is the result of a meeting of forces, ice and fire, cold and heat, shaping life without design or direction. It is an acknowledgement that life often arises unexpectedly, without plan, out of tension and contrast. From Ymir came the frost giants. And from the melting ice came Ordhumla, a great cow whose milk nourished Ymir. As she licked the salty ice, she uncovered Buri, an ancestor of the gods. Buri's descendants eventually became Odin and his brothers, who would go on to shape the world. These earliest stories remind us that in Norse myth, creation is not tidy or harmonious. It is rugged, wild, and born from conflict. Yet, within that conflict lies possibility, a recurring theme in Norse storytelling. Odin, Vili, and Ve, shaping the world. The 3 brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve, looked upon the chaos around them and decided to bring structure to existence. In a myth similar in spirit to those of Mesopotamia and Egypt, they used Ymir's body to craft the world. His flesh became the land. His blood became the seas. His bones became mountains. His skull became the sky. His eyebrows became the protective wall surrounding Midgard. This transformation of a giant's body into the cosmos mirrors the creation myths of several ancient cultures, yet in Norse myth, the act carries a deeper philosophical undertone. Order requires sacrifice. Creation has a cost. Even the gods must commit acts of destruction to bring forth life. Odin, as the eldest and most powerful, would eventually become the All-Father, a god not of omnipotence, but of relentless seeking. He is a wanderer, a scholar of the unseen, forever sacrificing for knowledge. The creation of humanity. Once the world took shape, Odin and his brothers walked along the seashore and found 2 fallen tree trunks. From these lifeless pieces of driftwood they crafted the first man and woman, Ask and Embla. The gods gave them their essential qualities. Odin gave them breath and life. Vili granted them mind and emotion. Ve bestowed speech, hearing, and sight. This quiet myth reflects a tender truth: humans are shaped from the simplicity of nature but infused with divine gifts, consciousness, awareness, and the ability to communicate. Humanity is fragile like wood, but alive with purpose. Ask and Embla were placed in Midgard, protected from the giants by Ymir's mighty eyebrows. Their existence symbolizes the Norse belief that human life is precious but vulnerable, always requiring courage in the face of adversity. The Aesir and the Vani. 2 families of gods. Norse mythology contains not one but 2 families of gods. The Aesir. Powerful, warlike, and associated with governance, protection, and structure. Odin, Thor, and Frigg belong to this family. The Vani. Connected to nature, fertility, and foresight. Njord, Freyr, and Freyja come from this lineage. These 2 families once warred, then formed a truce, exchanging hostages and merging their powers. The myth is symbolic of the balance between discipline and intuition, order and nature, 2 forces that humans constantly navigate. In the soft reflection of sleep, this war without victory becomes a meditation. Conflict often resolves not through dominance but through integration. The Norse relationship with fate. Perhaps the most defining feature of Norse myth is the concept of fate, woven into existence by the Norns, 3 powerful women who dwell beside Yggdrasil. Urd, what has happened? Verdandi, what is happening? Skuld, what will happen? Even the gods are bound by their threads. Odin himself knows that one day he will fall, as will Thor, Freyr, and others. In Norse cosmology, knowledge of doom does not lead to despair, it leads to courage. Courage not because victory is certain, but because meaning is found in standing firm despite inevitable loss. There is a deep peace in this world view. It reminds us that life's fragility is not a flaw but a feature. The Norse myths encourage acceptance, bravery, and presence in the face of uncertainty. A soft, quiet ending to part 11. As we close this part, imagine Yggdrasil glowing faintly under northern starlight, its branches swaying in a cold, gentle wind. Picture the distant halls of Asgard, the icy shadows of Niflheim, the warm glow of a human hearth in Midgard. Norse myth does not promise safety or victory. Instead, it promises meaning. Woven through struggle, resilience, and the quiet beauty of perseverance. Part 12. The myths of ancient Rome, foundations, heroes, and the gentle weight of destiny. Roman myth does not begin with thunderbolts or cosmic battles. It begins quietly, almost humbly, with rivers, shepherds, households, and the small domestic rituals that shaped everyday life. While the Romans borrowed many stories from the Greeks, their earliest myths, before gods merged with those of Olympus, were rooted in land, lineage, and the solemn rhythm of community duty. Tonight, we drift into these ancient Roman stories not as they appear in epic poetry but as they were felt by the earliest Latins. Their myths reveal a worldview grounded in practical reverence, ancestral connection, and the steady belief that human lives are woven into a larger fate governed by the gods and by history. Let your breathing settle softly. Let the gentle cadence of these early myths surround you as we wander through Roman fields at dawn, pass along the banks of the Tiber River, and sit beside hearthfires where elders once told their children the stories of their people. Before the empire, a people of the land. Long before marble temples and imperial triumphs, Italy was a patchwork of villages, farms, and sacred groves. Roman religion was originally not about dramatic storytelling but about presence. A sense that divine forces lived in everything. In the household hearth. In the boundary stones that marked fields. In the grain stored for winter. In the river that nourished livestock. In the forests and hillsides surrounding every settlement. The Romans believed in noumena, subtle spirits who inhabited natural places and everyday objects. These spirits did not appear in human form, nor did they speak in clear voices. Their myths were unspoken but deeply felt. In this early religion, reverence took the form of routine offerings, seasonal festivals, and the careful preservation of boundaries, spiritual as well as physical. This worldview fostered humility. Humans were part of a greater order, one that required respect and discipline. These values would later become the backbone of Roman law and social structure. But as Rome expanded, its myths began to shift from quiet rural reverence to larger narratives. Stories that connected its people to legendary ancestors, heroic deeds, and divine will. Janus, Vesta, and the hearth of the Roman spirit. Among the earliest Roman deities, Janus stands out as a unique figure. Depicted with two faces, one looking forward, one back, he embodied transitions, beginnings, and thresholds. In Roman thought, every journey, every undertaking, every ritual began with Janus. He guarded doorways and gateways, symbolizing the passage between states. Mythologically, Janus reflects the Roman fascination with order and structure. Every action must be framed within proper boundaries, every moment of change acknowledged with respect. In this sense, he was less a character in stories and more an omnipresent guardian of continuity. Vesta, goddess of the hearth, was another central figure in early Roman myth. Her flame burned perpetually in the heart of the city, tended by the Vestal virgins, priestesses sworn to purity and service. If the flame died, it was believed that misfortune would befall Rome. The mythic significance of Vesta is gentle but profound. She embodies the warmth of home, the constancy of community, and the protective power of shared ritual. In her presence, Romans found comfort and stability, qualities essential to a people who would one day rule vast territories. Together, Janus and Vesta tell us something important about early Roman values. Transition and stability, movement and home, change and continuity. Roman myth balances these forces carefully, just as Roman society would. Romulus and Remus, the founders and the she-wolf. Among all Roman myths, none is more iconic than the legend of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers raised by a she-wolf. Though often told with political flair, the tale's earliest layers reveal a quieter, symbolic truth. According to legend, the twins were sons of Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, and Mars, the god of war. Cast into the Tiber River as infants, they were carried to safety by the river's currents. A she-wolf discovered them, suckled them, and kept them warm until a shepherd found the boys and brought them into his home. In the soft glow of a sleep-friendly retelling, this myth becomes a meditation on resilience, belonging, and destiny. The twins survive. Against nature, against cruelty, against abandonment, because the world itself seems to protect them. Even a wild animal becomes a caretaker. The river becomes a guide. The shepherd becomes family. Romulus and Remus embody Rome's self-image, a people forged by struggle, tempered by hardship, and preserved by the favor of the divine. When they reached adulthood and sought to found a city, the brothers disagreed about its location and leadership. In the ensuing conflict, Remus was killed, and Romulus became the first king of Rome. It is a somber myth, not one of triumph but of sacrifice, loss, and the painful birth of identity. Rome, it suggests, is a city founded not only by strength but also by sorrow and consequence. Numa Pompilius and the sacred foundations of Roman law. After Romulus's turbulent reign, the Romans turned to Numa Pompilius, a wise and peaceful ruler. His myth describes a king chosen not for martial strength but for piety, virtue, and deep communion with the divine. He was believed to have been taught by the nymph Egeria, a spiritual guide who instructed him in ritual, law, and the art of governing through harmony rather than fear. Under Numa, many sacred institutions were established. The Vestal priesthood, the calendar system, the first major temples, rituals honoring Jupiter, Mars, and Quirinus. Numa's myths emphasize the Roman belief that society rests not only on military success but on ritual stability. Their early kings were not merely war leaders, they were caretakers of the sacred order. This myth highlights a fundamental Roman idea: law is divine in origin. To live morally is to live in accordance with a cosmic structure. Aeneas, the bridge between mythic worlds. By the time Rome encountered the Greeks, it sought to insert itself into the grand mythological tapestry of the Mediterranean. Thus the Romans embraced the myth of Aeneas, a Trojan hero who fled the burning ruins of his city and journeyed westward to Italy, where his descendants would one day found Rome. Aeneas is not heroic in the Greek mold. He is not driven by glory like Achilles or cleverness like Odysseus. Instead, he embodies pietas, a Roman virtue meaning duty to gods, family, and destiny. His story is gentle in its emotional core. He carries his father on his back. He holds his young son by the hand. He follows the will of the gods, even when it breaks his heart. In adopting Aeneas as an ancestor, Rome embraced an identity built not on conquest alone but on endurance, fidelity, and acceptance of divine purpose. The myth of Aeneas softly reinforces the Roman belief that one's life belongs not only to oneself but to history, to community, and to a destiny larger than any single person. Roman myth and the meaning of destiny. Throughout Roman mythology, destiny, fatum, flows like a constant river. It does not roar or command, it simply moves, guiding individuals and cities toward their appointed ends. Unlike the Norse sense of fate, which carries a somber inevitability, Roman fate is steady, structured, and deeply intertwined with civic duty. Roman myths suggest that greatness arises not from defying destiny but from embracing it with dignity. This worldview shaped generations of leaders and thinkers. It encouraged discipline, patience, and adherence to tradition. It made Rome not just a military power but a cultural and legal force whose influence endures around the world. Closing reflections for Part 12. As Part 12 comes to rest, picture the gentle flicker of Vesta's eternal flame. The quiet vigilance of Janus watching every threshold. The soft rustling of the Tiber's reeds as the infant twins drift toward their fates. The calm wisdom of Numa shaping rituals that would endure for centuries. and the weary steps of Aeneas carrying his father toward a new world. Roman myth whispers of duty, continuity, and the steady strength found in commitment to something greater than oneself. Part 13. The myths of ancient Persia, light, darkness, and the cosmic tension within all things. As we drift deeper into the great mythic traditions of humanity, we turn eastward to the ancient plateau of Persia, a landscape of deserts, mountains, and sweeping skies. Persian myth is unlike the mythologies of Greece or Mesopotamia. It is quieter, more philosophical, shaped not by pantheons of competing gods but by a profound cosmic question. What is the nature of good and evil, and how is the world meant to stand between them? Tonight, we enter softly into the mythic foundations of Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest continually practiced religions in the world. These myths began forming long before the Persian empires of Cyrus or Darius. They were shaped by wandering pastoral tribes who gazed upward each night at the brilliant stars. They saw the world as a place of moral meaning. They believed that creation itself was part of a cosmic struggle, a struggle not of noise and spectacle, but of ethical choice. In this part, we explore how early Persians imagined the universe, the forces that shaped it, and the role humanity plays within a story much larger than any individual life. Let your breathing deepen. Let your thoughts quiet. The myths of Persia unfold not in thunder but in gentle flame. A universe divided, Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. At the center of Persian mythology lies a duality, one that is not simple good versus evil but truth versus deception, light versus distortion. The supreme deity, Ahura Mazda, is not a warrior but a creator god associated with wisdom, illumination, and perfect order. Ahura Mazda is not portrayed visually in the earliest myths, instead, he is understood through attributes. He is eternal light. He is the source of Asher, truth, rightness, cosmic order. He is omniscient and benevolent. He creates with intention and clarity. Opposing him is Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman, the destructive spirit aligned with chaos, falsehood, and corruption. He is not equal in creative power, but he actively distorts what is good. Rather than crafting his own independent world, he attempts to ruin the beauty that Ahura Mazda brings into being. This dualistic worldview differs from mythologies where gods battle each other endlessly. In Persian myth, there are only two primordial forces. One that creates, and one that tries to create. The universe is their meeting place. But, and this is key, the myth insists that goodness will prevail. Time itself is structured so that darkness has a limit, and light has a destined victory. In this sense, Persian mythology is quietly hopeful, carrying within it a promise of ultimate restoration. The creation of the world, a slow unfolding of light. Persian myth describes creation as unfolding in stages. It is not immediate, nor chaotic. It is patient. Ahura Mazda first creates sky, a vast crystalline dome of light. Then he creates water, pure and undefiled. Next comes earth, then plants, then animals, and finally humans. Each layer strengthens the world against the corruption Angra Mainyu will later attempt to bring. The myth emphasizes something remarkable: creation is inherently good. Every part of the world, metal, soil, fire, breath, water, carries a spark of divine purpose. Yet Persian myth is no stranger to struggle. When Angra Mainyu becomes aware of the world's beauty, he attacks it, bringing disease to plants, predators to animals, and suffering to humans. This intrusion is not the result of human fault or divine negligence. It is built into the structure of time, as though existence requires both opposition and resilience. This worldview shaped the Persian spirit for millennia. It frames hardship not as punishment but as part of a cosmic tension in which humans participate. Fire, the living symbol of truth. Just as the hearth flame of Vesta-centered Roman mythology, Persian myth places sacred fire at the heart of its rituals. Fire, in this worldview, is the physical embodiment of Asher, the divine truth of Ahura Mazda. It is neither worshipped as a deity nor seen as a common element. Instead, it is a serene reminder of cosmic order. Fire burns steadily. It illuminates. It purifies. Through it, Persians felt they could perceive the presence of the divine. Imagine a quiet Persian temple at dusk. A priest tends to a flame that has been burning for generations. There is no chanting, no dramatic spectacle, only silence and the warm glow of firelight. In that glow, the entire mythic structure of the world seems to pulse gently, light pushing back darkness, clarity dissolving confusion. In this sense, myth blends seamlessly with practice. Fire is not merely symbolic, it is experimental, grounding the myth in lived reality. The first humans. Geomart and the unfolding of life. In the earliest Persian creation story, Ahura Mazda does not create Adam and Eve but a radiant primordial giant known as Geomart, or Geomard. His body shines with light, a physical manifestation of cosmic goodness. Angra Mainyu, desperate to mar creation, brings death to Geomart. Yet from Geomart's lifeless form emerges new life, plants and eventually the first human couple, Mashia and Mashiana. This sequence reveals a deep metaphysical truth in Persian myth. Goodness cannot be undone. Even in suffering, new life emerges. Mashia and Mashiana grow from the earth, nourished by the remnants of Geomart's divine radiance. They become the ancestors of humanity, tasked with upholding truth, resisting deceit, and participating in the cosmic struggle. The myth suggests that humans are not accidental beings nor pawns of the gods. They are central participants in the unfolding fate of the cosmos. Their choices matter. Their intentions matter. Their actions help determine how much of the world leans toward light or darkness. This is one of the earliest mythological systems to place moral responsibility directly in the hands of individuals. The Amisha Spentas, divine expressions of virtue. Unlike mythologies filled with dozens of gods, Persian myth features a small group of divine beings called Amisha Spentas. Holy immortals who embody aspects of Ahura Mazda's goodness. They are less like gods and more like emanations of virtues. They include Vohu Mana, good mind, compassion, wisdom. Ashavahishta, truth, order, the cosmic rightness governing all things. Kshatra Virya, ideal dominion, just rule. Spenta Amati, devotion, peace, earth. Horvatat, wholeness, health. Ameritat, immortality. Through these beings, the abstract nature of Ahura Mazda becomes accessible. They do not intervene with dramatic flair. Instead, they quietly guide humanity toward virtuous thought and action. It is a mythology of ethics rather than miracles. The quiet heroism of Persian myth. Persian myths do include battles, particularly in later epic traditions like the Shahnameth, but in the earliest strata, the true heroic act is choosing truth over falsehood. There is no promise that doing good brings immediate reward. Instead, the mythic system teaches that goodness contributes to a long cosmic arc that bends toward restoration. This worldview is profoundly gentle. It tells humanity, You are not alone. You are part of something vast. And every truthful act adds light to the world. It is perhaps one of the most sleep-friendly philosophies in ancient mythology, a quiet reassurance that good is both meaningful and ultimately victorious. A peaceful closing to Part 13. As Part 13 comes to rest, imagine a softly burning flame in a silent temple. The night air is cool. Stars glimmer overhead. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, forces of light and darkness continue their eternal tension, yet here, in this moment, everything feels still. Persian myth reminds us that even when the world is complex, the path toward light is simple: clarity, truth, kindness, and steady resolve. Part 14. The myths of ancient India. Cycles of time, cosmic order, and the endless breath of creation. As we continue our gentle drift through the world's most ancient myths, we now step softly into the spiritual landscape of ancient India, a place where the universe itself is understood not as a linear story but as an eternal cycle. For countless generations, myths from the Indian subcontinent have shaped one of the world's oldest and richest bodies of spiritual thought. These myths stretch far beyond the lives of gods and humans. They encompass the origins of time, the nature of consciousness, and the endless dance of creation and dissolution. In this part, we explore the earliest mythological ideas that would later inform Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and other Indian traditions. But we approach them in their most primordial form: vast, cosmic, serene. Imagine yourself listening to an ancient sage beneath a banyan tree as he speaks slowly of worlds that breathe in and out like the chest of the universe itself. Let your shoulders relax. Let your breathing deepen. The myths of India unfold like a river that has flowed for ages, moving gently, carrying wisdom in every ripple. A universe that breathes creation as cosmic cycles. Unlike many mythologies that begin with a single creation event, early Indian myth describes creation as happening again and again, through infinite cycles called kalpa. Each cycle is unimaginably long, stretching beyond the scale of any human life or civilization. The universe does not appear once but is born, expands, dissolves, and is reborn endlessly. This is one of the earliest mythic traditions to treat time not as a line, but as a wheel. Inside each cycle are smaller cycles, and inside those, still smaller ones. Human lives, divine ages, cosmic ages, all unfold according to the same rhythm. Nothing is truly lost, everything returns. To ancient Indian thinkers, this was deeply comforting. Impermanence was not tragic. It was simply the nature of existence. The universe itself breathes in creation and breathes out dissolution, just as you do now. This steady, cyclical rhythm forms the backdrop of all early Indian mythological ideas. The primordial waters and the golden egg. One of the oldest Indian creation myths begins not with gods but with water. Nothing existed at first except an endless, silent sea stretching in all directions. From this quiet expanse emerged a single golden egg, glowing softly in the darkness. It floated on the waters for ages, untouched. Inside the egg was Hiranyagarbha, the golden embryo, a cosmic being who later split the shell and brought forth the heavens and the earth. Some versions say he became the sun, others say he became the first creator god. All versions emphasize the serenity and slowness of the process. Creation does not erupt violently. It unfolds like dawn breaking across a still horizon. This myth has no antagonists, no battles, no turmoil. It is one of the most peaceful creation stories in world mythology. Inside this tranquility lies a deeper idea, that the universe arises from potential, from stillness, from inwardness rather than chaos. The world is born gently. The cosmic person, Purusha, and the order of things. Another primal myth describes the universe as originating from the body of a cosmic being called Purusha. In this myth, Purusha is not a god but a universal essence, a being as large as existence itself. When Purusha is offered as a cosmic sacrifice, his body becomes the structure of the world. His mind becomes the moon. His eyes become the sun. His breath becomes the wind. His bones become mountains. His blood becomes rivers. His flesh becomes the earth. And from his body also arise the earliest forms of human society, each with its role and purpose. This myth is rich with symbolism. It suggests that everything in existence is interconnected, that all things share the same source. It is one of the most holistic worldviews ever expressed in mythology. Nothing is separate. Everything is part of the same primordial being. And again, the tone is not one of violence but of transformation. Purusha does not die in agony, he becomes the world. Creation is a gift of himself. The primordial sound, and the vibration of existence. Perhaps the most exquisite idea in early Indian myth is that the universe began not with light or matter but with sound. A single vibration. A single syllable. Om. It is described not as a spoken sound but as the underlying resonance of existence, the vibration that allowed form to arise from formlessness. It is the root of breath, of consciousness, of life. In this myth, creation begins not in silence but in soft resonance, the way a deep chord might hum beneath a piece of music. The universe is not an object but an ongoing vibration, and everything within it participates in that sound. Humans, gods, wind, rivers, they are all manifestations of the same cosmic resonance. This myth, more than any other, creates a sense of peaceful unity, as though the entire universe is sustained by a gentle humming beneath all things. The three cosmic functions: creation, preservation, dissolution. In time, Indian myths began to describe three divine forces responsible for the maintenance of the universe: creation, preservation, dissolution. These were not seen as separate events but as phases of the eternal cycle. Later generations would associate these functions with the gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but in early myth they are more like cosmic principles than individuals. The universe requires all three actions to remain balanced. Creation without preservation would collapse into chaos. Preservation without dissolution would stagnate. Dissolution without rebirth would lead to emptiness. This triadic balance is one of the calmest, most philosophical mythic systems ever conceived. It explains change without fear. It explains endings without despair. If creation is a beginning, then dissolution is simply a return, like inhaling and exhaling. In this worldview, nothing is final. Everything transforms. The quiet heroism of Dharma. Unlike myths centered on battles or quests, Indian mythology emphasizes Dharma, a concept that blends duty, harmony, truth, and moral order. To act according to one's Dharma is to align oneself with the cosmic rhythm. It is not heroic in the usual sense, it is steady, patient, often quiet. Heroes in Indian myth are not defined solely by strength but by the clarity of their purpose. Dharma asks, what is the right action in this moment? What maintains harmony? What moves the world closer to truth? It is perhaps the most meditative moral system in any mythology, rooted not in divine command but in universal balance. Closing the gentle arc of Part 14. Tonight's journey has brought us into a mythic universe very different from those dominated by gods and battles. Instead, ancient Indian mythology surrounds us with a calm, rhythmic, philosophical cosmos, one where the universe breathes, cycles unfold, and creation arises from stillness. Imagine now the soft calm at the center of the universe, a quiet vibration humming beneath all things. Let it rest beneath your thoughts as you settle. Part 15. The Myths of Ancient Persia, Light, Shadow, and the Eternal Choice. As our journey into humanity's oldest myths continues, we now travel gently eastward into ancient Persia, a land of vast deserts, towering plateaus, and skies so wide they seem to hold every star ever born. The people of early Persia gazed often into the night, watching constellations sweep slowly over the horizon, and from these skies arose some of the most profound mythic ideas humankind has ever conceived. These myths are luminous yet solemn, filled with the interplay between light and shadow, hope and doubt, wisdom and temptation. Tonight, we settle into the oldest roots of Persian mythology, long before it was formalized into Zoroastrianism. These stories existed as oral traditions whispered by firelight, carried by traveling storytellers, and contemplated by priests who tended sacred flames. They explain the world not as chaos battling order but as an ongoing moral choice between truth and falsehood. Existence is not random, it is purposeful, directional, ethical. Let your breathing deepen. Picture a dark desert night lit only by the flicker of an ancient fire. You sit among travelers wrapped in wool and linen, listening as an elder tells the story of how the world began, and why your choices matter more than you could ever imagine. A world of two principles. The oldest Persian vision. At the core of ancient Persian myth lies a remarkably philosophical idea, that existence is shaped by two fundamental principles, neither of which created the other. They always were, and always will be. These principles are Asher, the principle of truth, order, harmony, and rightness. Drudge, the principle of falsehood, chaos, distortion, and decay. Unlike the dualities in other mythologies, this was not a battle between gods of equal physical strength. It was a moral and cosmic dualism. Asher was not simply good but the intrinsic order of the universe. Drudge was not merely evil but the fundamental twisting of reality, the shadow cast wherever truth bends. In this earliest form, the world exists in tension between these two forces, and every being, divine or mortal, participates in their struggle. This myth gives humanity a dignity rarely seen in ancient storytelling. Your actions matter on a cosmic scale. Every moment you act truthfully, kindly, or justly, you strengthen Asher. Every moment you deceive, exploit, or harm, you strengthen Drudge. This gentle but profound idea transformed mythology into moral philosophy long before philosophers wrote anything down. The birth of light and shadow. The creation myth of ancient Persia is unusually abstract and meditative. In the beginning, there was no world, no stars, no gods, only the two eternal principles and an infinite stillness surrounding them. From this stillness, the first emanation of Asher appeared, light. Not light as in fire or sun, but a metaphysical radiance representing wisdom, honesty, purity, and clarity. From the same stillness, the first emanation of Drudge emerged, shadow. Again, not darkness in a physical sense, but the dimming of truth, confusion, and the desire to deceive. Creation then unfolded as a kind of cosmic choreography between these forces. The first celestial beings aligned themselves with Asher and became guardians of light. Others, enticed by Drudge, became agents of distortion, twisting creation toward disorder. Humans were created last, not as playthings of the gods but as participants whose free will could tip the scales. This early myth offers a surprisingly empowering view. The world is not a battlefield for gods alone. It is a shared realm of responsibility. The sacred fire and the purity of elements. One of the most distinct features of Persian myth is its reverence for the elements, especially fire. While fire is sacred in many mythologies, ancient Persia saw it as a living manifestation of truth itself. To gaze at fire was to witness Asher. To tend a flame carefully was to protect truth from corruption. To let a flame die carelessly was to invite drudge. But fire was not alone in this sacred status. Early myths describe 5 pure elements: fire, water, earth, air. A sacred essence called Asher that permeates all things. These elements were not merely physical substances. They were moral substances. Polluting a river was not an environmental issue but an act that strengthened drudge. Keeping one's household hearth clean and bright was considered an act of spiritual discipline. This worldview made everyday life a sacred practice. Grinding grain, lighting lamps, clearing a path, all were opportunities to affirm the order of the world. In a sense, ancient Persian myth encourages you to live each day with awareness, gratitude, and responsibility. Even the smallest gesture contributes to cosmic balance. The first humans and the first choices. Where many early myths depict humanity's origin as accidental or even inconvenient, the Persian tradition describes the first humans as beings of immense potential. They were not created in ignorance but endowed with the capacity for moral discernment. Their purpose was to protect the world against distortion. The earliest versions of the myth describe the first humans as pure and radiant, aligned naturally with Asher. But drudge whispered to them, sowing confusion and doubt. The first humans were not punished for listening, instead, they became aware of the universal struggle. Through this awareness, they gained their true purpose, to choose. This moment is not framed as a fall from grace but as an awakening. In this myth, free will is a gift. Moral struggle is part of existence. Humans become guardians of cosmic order by their choices. This gives ancient Persian mythology a deeply introspective tone. It invites each person to participate consciously in shaping reality. The Bridge of Judgment, the Chinvat Crossing. One of the most haunting and beautiful images in Persian myth is the Chinvat Bridge, the crossing between the worlds of the living and the dead. It is not a place of fear but a place of truth. When a person dies, their soul travels to this bridge. If they have lived aligned with Asher, the bridge widens into a broad, safe path. If they have lived aligned with Drudge, the bridge narrows like a razor's edge. This is not punishment but clarity. One simply encounters the consequences of one's own actions. Truth reveals itself fully, without distortion. A gentle guardian spirit accompanies the souls of the righteous, guiding them into a realm of light and harmony. Those who strengthen Drudge are met by their own shadow, a dark counterpart shaped by their misdeeds. It is a remarkably introspective vision of judgment. You do not face an external judge. You face yourself. Because of this, Persian myth encourages a life of continual reflection. Every day is an opportunity to align with light. The cosmic renewal, a future of healing. Unlike many mythologies that end with destruction or eternal conflict, ancient Persian myth imagines an eventual healing of the world. The forces of Asher will ultimately restore creation to its intended state, not through conquest but through purification. In this long-awaited renewal, all wounds will be healed. All falsehoods will dissolve. all souls will eventually return to truth. Even those aligned with Drudge will be cleansed, not condemned forever. This belief, radically compassionate for its time, stems from the idea that all things originate from truth and will eventually return to it. In this worldview, time itself is a path toward harmony. Closing the quiet arc of Part 15. Tonight's mythology guided you through a landscape where fire glows softly against a dark desert, and truth is a cosmic force woven through all things. Ancient Persian myth stands among the world's most philosophical, offering not only stories but a gentle moral compass. As you settle deeper into rest, imagine a small flame flickering beside you, warm, steady, illuminating the darkness. Let it represent Asha, the simple, quiet truth at the center of your being. Part 16. The myths of ancient China, dragons, immortals, and the weaving of heaven and earth. In this next chapter of humanity's oldest myths, we travel east into the vast landscapes of ancient China, where rivers coil like silver dragons and mountains rise like sleeping giants. Chinese mythology is not one story or one tradition but a remarkable tapestry woven through millennia, combining ancestral reverence, cosmic order, philosophy, and poetic imagination. Tonight's lesson invites you to slow your breathing, as though drawing in the quiet wisdom of mountains and exhaling into the gentle hum of ancient rivers. Chinese myth is timeless and patient. Rather than thunderous battles or divine revolution, its stories tend to move like flowing water, revealing meaning through subtle motion. It is a world where spirits dwell in mist, immortals drink dew from sacred blossoms, and dragons carry the rain across the sky. Balance, harmony, and the cyclical nature of existence are its guiding principles. Tonight, you will drift through the origins of heaven and earth, the shaping of the world by cosmic hands, and the gentle, enduring myths that gave early China its sense of identity and belonging. Let your body soften. Imagine the soft glow of a lantern, hanging from a curved wooden beam. Beyond it, mist curls over a still pond. In this quiet place, the oldest Chinese stories begin. The beginning. Chaos, the cosmic egg, and the emergence of Pangu. Almost every culture has a creation myth, yet few begin as dreamily as China's. In the earliest myths, before the world took form, there was only Hundun, a state of primordial chaos. Hundun was not darkness or void, but a swirling, fertile mixture containing everything that would ever exist. It was neither peaceful nor violent, just endlessly shifting, like water stirred by unseen hands. Within this swirling chaos formed the cosmic egg, a perfect sphere of yin and yang in equilibrium. Inside it rested Pangu, the first living being, asleep in a state of deep eternal slumber for 18,000 years. When Pangu finally awoke, he stretched and found himself confined. With a mighty swing of his great axe, he split the egg in two. The light, pure elements, yang, rose upward to form the heavens. The heavy, dense elements, yin, sank downward to become the earth. And here begins one of the most peaceful creation labors in world mythology. Pangu did not force the world into shape through combat or destruction. Instead, he grew, and as he grew, he gently pushed heaven and earth farther apart. For 18,000 more years, Pangu increased in size, becoming a giant whose breath became the wind, whose voice became thunder, and whose movement shaped the seasons. Finally, when the world was stable and vast, Pangu lay down and passed into a restful death. His body transformed into the world itself. His eyes became the sun and moon. His blood became rivers and seas. His breath became clouds drifting slowly across the sky. His limbs became the four corners of the earth. His hair and beard became the forests. His bones became mountains. His sweat became rain. This myth is gentle yet monumental, portraying creation as a long, patient act of becoming. Nuer and the crafting of humanity. After the world took shape, early Chinese myths describe a time when the sky and earth drifted slightly apart. In this era wandered Nuer, a beautiful serpent-bodied goddess often associated with compassion, creativity, and transformation. She moved through the new world in quiet contemplation, admiring the mountains, rivers, and clouds shaped from Pangu's body. But she felt loneliness. And so she knelt beside a river, dipping her fingers into the clay. With slow, careful motions, she molded the first humans. She shaped their limbs, their features, and their expressions. When she placed them on the ground, they began to walk, breathe, and laugh. Seeing their joy, Nuer continued sculpting, forming thousands of clay beings. Yet as she grew tired, she dipped a reed into the water and flicked droplets of mud behind her. Wherever a droplet fell, a new human sprang up, less refined, more spontaneous, but equally alive. The myth reveals a gentle lesson: humans are equal in spirit but varied in circumstance. Nuer became a protector of humanity, guiding them, comforting them, and intervening when the world suffered damage. One day, two powerful forces, Gong Gong and Zhuanshu, clashed, and their battle cracked the sky. Floodwaters poured down. Winds howled. Stars fell. Nuer, horrified, began to repair the heavens. She melted 5 colored stones to patch the sky, reinforcing its arch like a patient artisan. She severed the legs of a great turtle to create 4 pillars holding up the world. She calmed the waters, soothed the winds, and restored balance. This myth highlights a tenderness rare in ancient creation stories, a goddess healing the world with love and craftsmanship. The Dragon Kings and the Gift of Rain. In Chinese myth, dragons are not monsters but benevolent forces tied to rainfall, rivers, and vitality. They are long, serpentine beings with shimmering scales and wise eyes. Their movements create wind, their breath summons clouds. Among them, the Dragon Kings rule the 4 seas, north, south, east, and west. Each Dragon King governs not only an ocean but also the rains that nourish the land. Farmers prayed to them in times of drought, burned incense, and offered bowls of water at shrines. And sometimes, according to the myths, a Dragon King would ascend into the sky, spiraling upward as silver clouds formed around his body. With a roar that sounded like rolling thunder, he would release gentle rain across the fields. The Dragon Kings are reminders of the interdependence between humans and nature. Thunderstorms were not feared but welcomed as blessings. Water was sacred. Clouds were seen as living expressions of heavenly beings. In these myths, harmony with nature is not just wise but necessary. And the dragon, soft-eyed and majestic, is a symbol of provident strength. The 8 immortals and the path of transcendence. As Chinese mythology matured, a new idea blossomed: the possibility of becoming immortal. Not immortal in the sense of conquering death through violence, but through inner cultivation, virtue, and harmony with the Tao, the natural way of the universe. Among the most beloved figures in mythology are the 8 immortals, each a mortal person who transcended the ordinary world. A scholar who loved poetry. A beggar with unexpected wisdom. A warrior with unshakable loyalty. A noblewoman seeking enlightenment. A musician whose flute shaped reality. And others with unique talents and stories. Their tales are soft, humorous, and deeply moral. They wander across seas, mountains, and heavens not as conquerors but as gentle sages, helping mortals, correcting injustices, and demonstrating that enlightenment does not erase individuality but enhances it. Each immortal embodies the idea that ordinary people can access profound truth through humility, balance, and compassion. The Weaving Maid and the Cowherd, a story of love and stars. One of the most dreamlike myths in Chinese lore is the story of Xinyu, the heavenly weaving maid, and Niulong, a mortal cowherd. Their love bridged heaven and earth but violated celestial law. As punishment, the Queen Mother of Heaven drew her hairpin across the sky, creating the vast Milky Way to separate them. Yet once a year, magpies form a living bridge of wings across the stars, allowing the lovers to reunite. This myth is soft and romantic, painting the cosmos with longing, devotion, and hope. It reminds listeners that love has cosmic power, and separation is not the end of connection. The philosophical tone of Chinese myth. What makes Chinese mythology feel unique in our long global journey is its harmony with natural rhythms and its philosophical depth. Its stories do not scream for attention or dramatize conflict, they flow with the gentle certainty of rivers, guiding listeners toward understanding. At its heart are these themes: balance, not domination; harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity; wisdom that emerges from humility; compassion as a creative force; the cosmos as a living, interconnected organism. Chinese myth invites you not to fear gods but to coexist with them, to respect nature, to nurture virtue, and to understand that life unfolds in cycles, day and night, seasons, generations, opportunities. Tonight, let these gentle lessons linger. Let the sound of imagined rivers soothe you. Let mountains rise behind your eyelids. Let dragons spiral softly across the dark sky of your thoughts. Part 17. The Myths of the Indigenous Americas, Spirits of Forest, Sky, and Stone. As we continue drifting through the oldest myths of the human race, Part 17 invites us into the vast and varied mythic landscapes of indigenous North and South America. This is not the tale of one culture or one tradition, but a wide and deeply interconnected world of creation stories, sky beings, earth spirits, animal guides, ancestral guardians, and sacred cycles. The myths here are like constellations reflected on still water. They shimmer with meaning, and each culture reflects a different point of brilliance. Settle into your breath. Imagine soft drumming, steady as a heartbeat. Picture cool air over a dense forest canopy, or warm wind crossing wide plains, or a high mountain peak dusted with snow. The Americas contain every kind of sacred geography, and ancient myth wrapped itself around these landscapes like a protective blanket, gently shaping how early societies understood their place in the world. In this quiet nighttime chapter, we will wander carefully, respectfully, and slowly through several foundational myths, pausing along the way to appreciate their beauty, their depth, and the ways they reveal how humans once listened to the earth with reverence. The many beginnings. Creation from sky and earth. Across North America, creation often begins with a meeting between sky and earth, sometimes as lovers, sometimes as partners, sometimes as cosmic opposites who yearned for harmony. Among the Haudenosaunee Iroquois, the universe begins above the clouds in the sky world, where a great celestial tree grows. One day, a pregnant sky woman falls through an opening and tumbles toward the watery earth below. Animals, seeing her descent, gather to help. A giant turtle rises to catch her, forming the first landmass, Turtle Island. As Sky Woman walks across the turtle's shell, she creates life with each step. Her daughter later gives birth to twin sons, one shaping gentle creation, the other introducing struggle and contrast. Together, they shape a world in balance. This myth reflects profound softness. Creation is not explosive but cooperative. Animals act with compassion. Earth forms through collaboration. Human beings emerge through a chain of relationships rather than domination. It is a warm cosmic family rather than a battlefield of gods. Farther west, the Hopi creation story tells of multiple worlds, each abandoned as humanity matures spiritually. They emerge into the present world through a reed, guided by the wisdom of Spider Grandmother. She teaches them weaving, song, and the path of right living. Her voice is gentle but steady, a reminder that creation requires responsibility. In the cold north, Inuit myths describe the goddess Sedna, the mother of sea beasts. Born as a mortal, Sedna undergoes a transformation that reveals the mythic relationship between life, suffering, and abundance. After being cast into icy waters, she sinks to the ocean floor, becoming the ruler of all marine creatures. Hunters must treat the animals with respect or Sedna will withhold them, tangling her hair so seals and whales cannot escape. Only through ritual, humility, and care can balance be restored. Across these diverse stories, creation is intimate rather than violent. The world forms through touch, cooperation, birth, and transformation. These myths teach that existence is a web of relationships rather than a hierarchy of power. The sacred role of animals, teachers, partners, and ancestors. One of the most distinctive features of Indigenous American myth is the central role of animals. They are not side characters or mere symbols but spiritual beings with agency, intelligence, and wisdom. They teach, guide, protect, and sometimes challenge humans, reminding them to remain humble and respectful. The coyote, for example, appears in many Western tribal traditions, sometimes a clever trickster, sometimes a teacher, sometimes both. His stories are humorous yet profound, revealing the flaws and beauty of human nature. Coyote brings fire, invents death, or rearranges the stars, always reminding listeners that wisdom often hides behind foolishness. The raven, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is another powerful figure. He brings light into the world by stealing the sun from a greedy being who hoards it. He uses cunning more than force and reveals that knowledge is a treasure sometimes gained through boldness. In the Great Plains, the buffalo is sacred. It is more than an animal, it is life itself. Myths describe the buffalo woman who brings teachings, ceremonies, and sustenance. When she departs, she promises to return in times of need, leaving behind rituals that unite the people. Even small animals carry great significance. The hummingbird appears in many Mesoamerican myths as a symbol of perseverance and love. The jaguar, in South America, is a guardian of both forests and spiritual realms. This deep respect shows how ancient cultures saw the world not as something to control but as something to partner with. Animals were understood as teachers who carried ancient knowledge. The importance of cycles, seasons, stars, and renewal. Indigenous myths throughout the Americas share a reverence for cycles. The earth is not static. It moves through patterns of renewal. Seasons. Migrations. Planting and harvesting. Birth and death. Night and day. Even the rising and falling of entire worlds. The Maya and Aztec civilizations built intricate calendars informed by myth. Their stories of gods who sacrifice themselves to rekindle the sun remind us that cosmic order requires courage and giving. To them, time itself was sacred. The Navajo creation stories emphasize harmony, Hojo, a state of balance that must be continually nurtured. Their world is shaped by songs and rituals that maintain cosmic order. The mythic twins, Monster Slayer and Born for Water, bring safety to humanity but also establish the moral lessons needed to live in beauty. And in the Amazon rainforest, countless tribes tell of great serpents who carve the rivers, or sky spirits who teach humans how to cultivate the land without exhausting it. These myths are, at their core, reminders that all life depends on reciprocity. Myths as living memory. Many of these traditions do not separate myth from identity. The stories serve as a living archive of survival, environmental knowledge, and spiritual guidance. They teach how to hunt respectfully, how to use plants for medicine, how to recognize signs from nature, how to live as stewards rather than conquerors. The stories are ancestral companions, passed down softly in longhouses, around fires, in winter lodges, and in quiet forest clearings. With each retelling, the myth becomes not just an old narrative but an active relationship with the world. This is why, even today, indigenous myths feel alive. They are not distant relics but living guides. The themes that bind these myths together. Despite the immense cultural diversity of the Americas, their oldest myths share several profound themes. 1. The earth is sacred and alive. Mountains, rivers, winds, animals, and stars all carry spirit. Interaction with them requires humility. 2. Humans are part of nature, not above it. People are woven into a larger tapestry. 3. Knowledge often comes from listening to animals, ancestors, dreams, and the land itself. 4. Creation is ongoing. The world is not finished, it evolves through cycles of renewal. 5. Balance must be maintained. Imbalance leads to suffering, harmony leads to abundance. These themes create a peaceful, reflective atmosphere perfectly suited for sleep. Listening to them feels like being wrapped in a blanket of ancestral wisdom. A soft ending. As the myths of the indigenous Americas come to a close for tonight, imagine a quiet clearing beneath a sky full of stars. A small fire burns low, crackling softly. You sit among generations of storytellers, each voice weaving another thread into the great tapestry of myth. You are part of the story now, drifting gently in its rhythms, held by its wisdom, warmed by its fire. Part 18. The myths of ancient Persia, fire, stars, and the eternal struggle for balance. As we settle deeper into this series, Part 18 brings us into one of humanity's oldest and most influential mythic worlds, though often spoken of softly, like a remembered dream. This is the world of ancient Persia, a land of wide plateaus, burning deserts, starlit skies, and sacred fire. It is a landscape that inspired some of the earliest recorded religious philosophies, myths that shaped empires, and moral frameworks that still ripple through modern belief systems. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and imagine standing atop a high plateau at twilight. The sky is turning a soft violet, the air cooling. In the distance, a small fire temple glows faintly, its flame dancing behind carved stone walls. You smell the desert wind carrying a hint of smoke. In this calm dusk, when day and night blend seamlessly, you begin to understand the heart of Persian mythology, a world defined by duality, harmony, and the choices that guide us between them. Tonight's story will move gently through the myths of Zoroastrianism and the older Indo-Iranian traditions that inspired it. We will explore cosmic creation, the eternal dance of light and shadow, and the role of human beings in a universe shaped by moral tension but softened by hope. the dawn of duality, a universe of light and shadow. The Persian mythic worldview rests on one of the oldest philosophical foundations known to humankind, the cosmic dualism between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, is not a warrior god or a thunder god or a king of heaven. Instead, he is the embodiment of pure wisdom, goodness, order, and truth. His very presence is gentle, radiant like soft dawnlight spreading across snow-capped mountains. Angra Mainyu, on the other hand, is not exactly a devil in the Western sense but a force of negation, chaos, destruction, and deceit. He is the cold wind that withers crops, the sickness that steals life, the cruelty that blinds judgment. Between them lies a universe created through intention. Unlike mythic traditions where gods act impulsively or violently, ancient Persian myth insists that creation began with a conscious choice to bring forth Asher, the principle of truth, harmony, and rightness. The universe did not erupt into being. It unfolded, like a flower opening slowly in perfect geometric order. This idea comforted ancient listeners. It suggested that the world is not chaotic or arbitrary. It has structure. It has purpose. Breathing slowly, you may notice the calming effect of such a worldview. A universe built on intention is a universe that welcomes reflection rather than fear. Fire as the bridge between worlds. In Persian myth, fire is not simply flame. It is a living presence, a connection between the physical world and the spiritual one. Even today, Zoroastrian temples keep sacred fires burning continually, flames tended by careful hands. In mythic time, fire served as a reminder of the divine spark inside all things. The oldest myths do not treat fire as something humans conquered but as a gift of insight, clarity, and cosmic memory. When ancient worshippers gathered around a fire in silence, they believed the flame helped them see truth, Asher, more clearly. For them, fire was a teacher that burned away illusion. Imagine yourself sitting near such a flame in a quiet stone temple. The air is still. The light flickers softly against the walls. The shadows sway like gentle dancers. It is both calming and mesmerizing, anchoring you in the present moment. The myth is not outside you anymore. It is glowing before you. The story of creation, a calm but powerful unfolding. Creation in ancient Persia does not begin with a single moment but a sequence of emanations, each one unfolding from Ahura Mazda's wisdom like petals of a cosmic lotus. The world begins as a spiritual realm, perfect and without opposition. Then Ahura Mazda creates the sky, the water, the earth, the plants, the animals, and finally, humanity. Each creation is smooth, peaceful, and harmonious. But as the world becomes fully formed, Angra Mainyu awakens. He sees creation and is filled with jealousy and rage. Instead of appreciating the ordered beauty, he seeks to corrupt it. He introduces decay into plants, predators into animals, shadows into the sky. Yet this duality is not presented as reason for despair. Instead, it forms the foundation of the mythic worldview. Good and evil exist in tension, and human beings play a crucial role in tipping the scales. Unlike many mythologies where humans are passive creations or toys of divine powers, ancient Persian myths place enormous significance on human moral choices. Every good deed strengthens Ahura Mazda's creation, and every harmful action feeds the darkness. This makes the mythology deeply introspective. It asks not just what the gods are doing but what you are doing. The role of humans, co-creators of destiny. In the Persian mythic imagination, humans are not merely witnesses to the cosmic struggle but participants in it. They are given free will, moral responsibility, and the ability to create order in their own lives. This perspective gives humanity dignity. It also places immense trust in human potential. Through simple acts, speaking truth, caring for the land, treating others with respect, humans reinforce the structure of the universe. Through cruelty or dishonesty, they help unravel it. This worldview encouraged mindfulness long before such a word existed. In a quiet, sleep-friendly sense, it reminds us that life is not a storm we endure but a pattern we help stitch, thread by thread. Myths of heroes and the eternal quest for harmony. Ancient Persian lore is filled with heroes who embody the values of truth, courage, and righteousness. Among them is Yima, the first king and a mythic steward of the earth. Yima's reign is described as a golden age, a time without hunger or death. He expands the world to accommodate the growing population, a gentle act of care rather than conquest. Then there is Rostam, the immense hero of the Shahnameth, whose battles are epic and symbolic. Yet even Rostam, strong and fierce, is portrayed as deeply human, full of love, grief, and moral burden. Unlike the cold perfection of mythic gods, Persian heroes remind listeners of the messy, emotional reality of trying to live in accordance with truth. And so the myths tell us, harmony is not static. It is a practice, a rhythm, a journey. The end of time, a gentle renewal. Zoroastrian myth includes an eventual cosmic resolution, not through annihilation but purification. Fire and molten metal cleanse the world, but for the righteous, the experience is warm as milk. Angra Mainyu dissolves back into nothingness. Souls are reunited. Life begins anew, free from suffering. This is not the thunderous, terrifying end depicted in many traditions. It is soft, restorative, a long exhale at the end of a difficult age. It reassures listeners that the universe is ultimately tending toward healing. A soft ending for tonight. As we gently close part 18, imagine the flame in the fire temple burning steadily. Imagine the stars overhead, bright against a desert sky. Imagine the calm presence of Ahura Mazda, watching over creation without force, inviting goodness through quiet inspiration. You are safe within the myth. You are part of its unfolding story. And in this moment, the world feels ordered, balanced, and at peace. Part 19. The myths of ancient China, dragons, cosmic breath, and the rhythm of heaven and earth. As we drift gently into part 19, our journey brings us to the early mythic landscapes of ancient China, a world shaped by mist-covered mountains, winding rivers, ancestral spirits, and the slow breathing of the cosmos itself. These myths are among the oldest in human memory, emerging from a civilization that preserved stories not just in writing, but in ritual, in nature, and in the quiet order of daily life. For tonight, let your thoughts soften. Imagine yourself standing beside a serene river at dawn. A thin veil of mist hugs the water. Bamboo leaves sway quietly overhead. Far in the distance, a mountain peak glows with the first light of morning. A sense of stillness enters your body. This is the environment from which the earliest Chinese myths arose, a world where nature and spirit intertwined, where celestial events echoed earthly rhythms, and where every living thing participated in a grand cosmic harmony. These stories do not erupt in violence or shock. Instead, they unfold like gentle ripples on the surface of a lake. They comfort, They soothe. And they remind us that the oldest myths often saw the universe not as chaotic, but as a balanced and breathing being. Tonight, we explore creation, transformation, and the enduring wisdom of the Chinese mythic imagination. Before the beginning, the cosmic egg and the birth of order. Ancient Chinese myth opens not with conflict, but with quiet potential. Before heaven and earth existed, everything was contained within a single, silent, swirling mass, a cosmic egg. Inside this egg floated Pangu, the first being, asleep in total darkness. For eons he rested, completely still, while the universe gathered its strength. Then, one day, Pangu awoke. With a slow, deliberate breath, he stretched, and as he did, the egg cracked open. The lighter, purer elements rose and drifted upward, forming the heavens. The heavier, denser elements sank and settled, becoming the earth. This separation was not violent. It was natural, like the mist rising from a warm cup of tea. Pangu stood between heaven and earth, holding them apart as they continued to drift. Each day he grew a little taller, and the sky arched a little higher above him. For millennia he held this gentle balance, forming mountains, valleys, winds, and rivers simply by existing. When Pangu felt his work was done, he lay down and peacefully became part of creation. His breath becoming the wind, his voice the thunder, his eyes the sun and moon, his blood the rivers, his hair the forests, his bones the stones, and his strength the very foundation of the earth. And so the world emerged not from war or chaos, but from gradual separation, gentle transformation, and the peaceful sacrifice of a single cosmic being. This myth set the tone for much of China's early world view, that balance, not battle, is the engine of existence. Newer and the crafting of humanity, a myth of care and compassion. In the quiet world Pangu shaped, humanity did not yet exist. That role belonged to Newer, one of the most beloved and serene figures in ancient Chinese mythology. She is often depicted with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a serpent or dragon, a symbol of harmony between human virtues and the flowing, natural forces of the earth. Newer wandered through the world after Pangu's transformation, admiring its rivers, mountains, and forests. Yet she felt something was missing. A being that could reflect upon creation, speak, laugh, and share in the beauty around her. So Newer knelt beside a riverbank and began shaping figures out of yellow clay. She formed their limbs carefully, smoothed their features, and gently breathed life into them. These first humans stood, blinking with curiosity, and Newer felt joy in her creation. As she continued to craft individuals by hand, she realized that shaping each one would take an eternity. So she dipped a rope into the river mud and flung droplets across the land. Wherever a drop fell, a new human sprang to life. This gentle myth carries a sense of comfort. It suggests that human beings were created not as an afterthought or a burden, but as objects of care, some lovingly formed in detail, others emerging naturally from the creative flow of the world. Newer's myth reminds early listeners that life arises from affection and artistry rather than conflict. The broken sky? A story of repair and restoration. One of the most soothing myths in ancient Chinese tradition is also one of the most important. It tells of a time when the harmony of the world fractured. Long after humanity had spread across the earth, disaster struck. One of the gods, Gong Gong, in a fit of anger, collided with a great mountain, destroying one of the pillars that held up the sky. The heavens tilted. Fires erupted. Floodwaters poured across the land. The world trembled on the edge of collapse. But unlike myths where destruction spirals out of control, this story moves toward healing. When Nua saw the suffering below, she was filled with a calm, determined sorrow. Instead of punishing or fighting, she focused on restoration. She gathered 5 colored stones, white, blue, black, red, and yellow, and melted them together to mend the sky. She cut the legs off a giant turtle to form new pillars. She tamed the floods and quieted the fires. Slowly, gently, the world was repaired. Nua's actions symbolize one of the oldest principles in Chinese philosophy: the universe naturally seeks balance, and compassionate intervention restores harmony. This idea would become central not only to myth, but to governance, medicine, art, and everyday life. The message is peaceful and reassuring: even when the sky seems to break, restoration is possible. Dragons, symbols of power, blessing, and gentle strength. In many cultures, dragons are fierce or destructive. But in ancient China, dragons were benevolent, wise, and deeply connected with rain, rivers, and life-giving forces. They soared through clouds, curled through oceans, and watched over imperial dynasties. The earliest myths describe dragons as masters of transformation. They could shrink to the size of a silk thread or expand until their bodies stretched across the sky. They were protectors, guides, and symbols of spiritual elevation. To ancient Chinese listeners, dragons brought comfort. They represented strength without aggression, movement without chaos, an embodiment of the balanced force called qi, the breath of the universe. The rhythm of yin and yang, a mythic principle beyond story. While not a narrative myth in the traditional sense, the concept of yin and yang lies at the heart of nearly all ancient Chinese mythology. It is the idea that everything in the universe exists as complementary forces. Light and shadow, motion and stillness, earth and sky, masculine and feminine, growth and decline. This was not conflict. It was rhythm. Yin and yang were not opposites battling one another. They were partners in an eternal dance, each rising and falling in turn, each containing a trace of the other. This gentle cosmology made the world feel less threatening. Life was not a fight against darkness but a participation in the cycles of nature. As you breathe slowly now, you may notice that this rhythm still exists within you. The rise and fall of breath, the beating of the heart, the shifting of emotions, the ebb and flow of energy. The ancient Chinese saw these as mirrors of the universe itself. A sleepy descent into mythic mountains. Near the end of this chapter, imagine climbing a quiet mountain path lined with pine trees. Far ahead, the clouds curl like dragons. A soft breeze moves through the needles overhead. Somewhere, a waterfall hums gently in the distance. This is where the myths of ancient China live, not in chaos, but in tranquility. A world born from a cosmic egg. A humanity crafted by a compassionate goddess. A sky repaired by steady, determined hands. A universe made of balanced breath. A cycle of harmony reflected in every living thing. Tonight these myths take root inside your imagination, offering a peaceful reminder. The world is held together not only by powerful beings, but by care, balance, and the slow rhythm of nature. Part 20. The first stories of Indigenous Australia, Dreamtime, Ancestral Paths, and the Living Land. As we arrive at the final chapter of this series, we travel farther back into human memory than almost any written myth can reach. Tonight, we step into the vast and ancient continent of Australia, home to one of the world's oldest continuous cultures. The indigenous peoples of Australia have preserved mythic traditions for tens of thousands of years, passed down not in books or carvings or monuments, but in song, story, dance, and landscapes themselves. This is the world of the dreamtime, or the dreaming, a spiritual, mythic, and philosophical system that stretches across tribes and regions, unique to each but woven from a shared understanding. These stories do not exist long ago in a distant past. Instead, they are happening always, now, beneath the surface of everyday life. Time in the dreaming is layered, circular, and eternal, a living dimension through which ancestral beings shaped the world and continue to guide it. For tonight, let your mind settle gently. Imagine standing in a quiet desert plain just after sunset. The horizon glows faintly red as the last light fades. The heat of the day slips away, and a soft nighttime breeze whispers across the sand. Above you, the southern sky reveals brilliant clusters of stars, including the swirling shape of the Milky Way. The darkness feels alive, but not frightening, alive in a peaceful, breathing way. Here, beneath these ancient skies, the oldest stories on Earth still walk. The dreaming, a world within and beyond time. In Indigenous Australian cosmology, the dreaming is not a single story but an entire reality, both the beginning of all things and the continuous source of spiritual power. To understand the dreaming, imagine time not as a line, but as a great pool of still water. When you look into its surface, you see reflections of the past, present, and future all at once. The ancestors who journeyed across the land at the dawn of creation are still present in the world today. They exist not as ghosts or distant divinities, but as living energies in the landforms, rivers, animals, and stories that shape daily life. Dreaming stories tell how these ancestral beings carved rivers, raised mountains, created animals, and established the laws by which humans should live. These beings walked, danced, sang, or fought across the empty landscape, and in doing so formed the features of the natural world that still stand today. The dreaming is therefore both creation and continuity, a reminder that everything in nature possesses spiritual meaning. Rocks, trees, animals, winds, and waterholes are not inert. They are alive with ancestral memory. The concept is deeply soothing. It suggests a universe where nothing is ever truly lost, and where every path, every river bend, every sunrise participates in a timeless sacred story. Creation through movement, the ancestors shape the land. Unlike some mythologies where creation is a singular moment, Indigenous Australian stories describe creation as a journey, a series of movements through the landscape. Different nations and language groups have their own versions, but many share a similar flow. Ancestral beings awoke from beneath the earth or within the sky and began traveling across a barren, silent world. As they moved, they transformed it. A great serpent might carve a riverbed with the sweep of its tail. A group of dancing figures might form hills and valleys with the rhythm of their steps. Two warriors battling might create cliffs or gorges where their spears struck the ground. Each feature of the natural environment thus carries a story, forming what we now call songlines or dreaming tracks. These paths crisscross the continent, linking sacred places through narrative, melody, and spiritual inheritance. To walk these paths is to participate in the dreaming. To sing their songs is to keep the world alive. Even now, imagine yourself walking slowly across that quiet plain under the stars. The land feels still, but full of presence. Every subtle rise or dip beneath your feet carries memory. The myths here do not exist outside the landscape, they are the landscape. The rainbow serpent, guardian, creator, and shaper of water. One of the most widespread ancestral beings across the continent is the rainbow serpent, known by many names in different regions. She, or sometimes he, or both, embodies the power of water, storms, fertility, and transformation. In many stories, the rainbow serpent was the first being to awaken in the dreaming. Rising from beneath the ground, her movement rippled across the surface of the earth, carving rivers, lakes, and billabongs. Her shimmering body reflected the colors of the rainbow, linking the sky to the land through water. She is both nurturer and protector. She brings rain, allowing plants and animals to flourish. But she can also withdraw her waters or unleash storms if humans disturb the sacred balance of the land. What is most calming and profound about this myth is the idea that water itself is sacred, alive, and watchful. The rainbow serpent reminds all who hear the story that survival in Australia's often harsh environment depends on respecting the sources of life. As you listen now, you might imagine the gentle, rhythmic movement of water. A slow ripple. A soft current. A quiet reminder of continuity. The first people, born of the earth, guided by ancestors. In many Dreamtime traditions, humans emerged from the earth itself, out of clay, out of sand, or out of sacred trees. Often, they were shaped or awakened by ancestors who taught them how to hunt, gather food, create shelters, and live in harmony with the environment. These myths emphasize not human dominion over nature, but human belonging within it. The land is not a resource to exploit. It is a relative. Alive, conscious, and deserving of respect. Humans live not above it, but among it. Every action ripples outward. This worldview creates a deep sense of calm accountability. It asks listeners to understand themselves as part of a much larger whole, where balance and reciprocity guide every relationship. The power of songlines, walking, singing, and remembering. One of the most remarkable aspects of Indigenous Australian mythology is the concept of songlines. Paths that trace the journeys of ancestral beings across the land. By singing the correct songs in the correct order, one can navigate vast distances, read the landscape, and honor spiritual responsibilities. These songs contain ecological knowledge, moral teachings, and sacred histories. They are maps, prayers, stories, and laws woven into a single living form. Imagine the soothing repetition of a sung melody guiding you across the desert. There is no need for urgency or competition. The journey is slow, deliberate, and deeply connected to the earth beneath your feet. Songlines remind us that myths are not just stories. They are ways of moving through the world. Afterlife and the endless dreaming. Many Dreamtime traditions speak of death not as an ending but as a transition. When a person dies, their spirit returns to the dreaming, rejoining the ancestral realm from which life first emerged. The spirit may watch over loved ones, guide the community, or merge with natural elements such as stars or rivers. In some traditions, newborn children draw their souls from specific sacred places linked to Dreamtime events. This cyclical view of life and death offers a sense of serenity. It assures listeners that the journey continues, that everything returns to the cosmic story, and that no one ever fully disappears. The gentle universality of the oldest myths. As Part 20 draws to a close, reflect on how these ancient Australian myths differ from others in this series. There is little emphasis on war, hierarchy, or divine punishment. Instead, these stories encourage harmony with nature, respect for ancestors, awareness of the land, patience, balance, continuity, They offer a worldview where creation is ongoing, where stories breathe through rocks and rivers, and where each individual participates in a timeless communal dream. Tonight, imagine the stars above that quiet desert plain once more. The Milky Way arches overhead, glowing softly. The earth beneath you is warm from the day's sun. You feel connected, calm, and part of something vast and ancient. The dreaming is not far away. It is all around you. As we come to the end of this long and quiet journey through the world's oldest myths, allow yourself a moment to feel how wide and ancient the human imagination truly is. Across deserts, mountains, forests, and oceans, people have always looked upward to the stars, outward to the land, and inward to the heart in search of meaning. The stories we explored, whispered beside fires, carried through song, carved into memory, are some of the earliest ways human beings understood creation, life, morality, and the mysteries that surround us. Though they come from distant cultures and long-vanished worlds, these myths are united by something timeless. A gentle desire to explain our place in the universe, to find harmony in uncertainty, and to anchor ourselves to something larger and older than we can fully comprehend. As you rest now, let these ancient stories drift quietly through your thoughts like soft currents of wind, reminders that you are part of a long human lineage of wonder, reflection, and imagination. The myths continue, in you, in the world, and in the quiet places where memory becomes dream. Background historian out.